I've been really, really looking forward to having my good friend Chris Thomas in today. With us on Overcome Out Loud is Chris Thomas. He is an 8-year veteran in the NFL. He is a Super Bowl champion wide receiver with the Rams. He is the founder and developer of Fusion Odyssey Sports. He has taken the game of sports, in my opinion, to a whole new level, teaching kids to work on their minds and their relationship with that sport in a whole new way. I've actually been through some of his modules, and I love what he's doing. So I'm so excited to sit down and have this conversation with you, Chris. Thanks.
Yeah, brother.
And one of the main reasons why I was really excited to sit down with Chris is because, as I mentioned, Chris is a 8-year veteran in the NFL. He's wearing his Super Bowl ring that he got. And I think when we see people like Chris Thomas, who kind of epitomizes that pro athlete, we tell ourselves a story of what that life must have been like. At least for me, it's like storied high school career, great Division I performance, recruited into the NFL and drafted and then kind of works my way up the ranks into this fame and spotlight and fortune that comes with being an NFL player. And, what a charmed life that must be. And one of the things I respect most about you, amongst a lot of things, having known you for a long time now, is the fact that story is just not true, and that you, like so many people, had to reach down deep at certain times, and we'll get into those stories of all the things that you've done to overcome those obstacles in your life to get that ring. I always say the man on top of the mountain did not get dropped off by a helicopter, and I know that's the case for Chris Thomas. He walked every step of that mountain, and sometimes he had to sit down, sometimes he had to ask for help, and it's that part of your story that is so inspiring, and I think it's what led you to obviously help so many athletes of all ages now really reframe their experience around sports to allow them to perform. And I've seen the results of those efforts. I get to see them in town when I happen to be on a run and see you working with kids. I've actually been on your platform and gone through some of the video series that you've done. In fact, I'm going to re-engage with that and do that again because there's so much of it that applies to my life, and I just love the way that you're helping kids reframe their relationship with sports, and it's what I most respect about you is your honesty and your vulnerability. So you ready to get into it?
Let's do it.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So as I said, I think all of us start somewhere. So, can you take me back to the early years of being Chris Thomas and, what that was like for you, where you grew up, how you grew up, and where your passion and drive for athletics and sports came from? I know you were a multi-sport athlete. So, take us back a little bit to those early years, man.
Yeah. So grew up in a place called Pomona, not the best of places at the time. Single mom for a long time. Dad died when I was young, so didn't have that father figure in my life, which I think looking back probably had an impact on some level. I was a bit rambunctious as a kid, but I also think the environment I was in really kind of shaped who I would become at a very young age. Because where I grew up, it was sort of like you fended for yourself, right? There was no, if someone pushed you down on the concrete because you're playing, 2-hand touch 7-on-7 in the street, and some kid who's 5 years older than you decides that he wants to throw you on the concrete, you go home crying. Your mom's not going to go knock on their door and say, hey, your little Johnny did this to my little Johnny. What's going on, right? She's going to say, hey, if you don't like that, then stay in the house, right?
Right on, yeah.
And, most of the time, you're not going to like staying in the house. You have one other option. That is to go out there and learn how to contend with the forces that might prevent you from experiencing life the way you want it, right? So, like fighting when we were younger was not uncommon. It happened every single week. And just kind of became who you were. You come to expect it, to the point where we got boxing gloves as a kid, and those would last about 4 days because you'd be fighting, 6 different people in a day. You know what I mean? So it was just a really interesting way to grow up. But when I was a kid, I fell in love with football. Not really sure why. The Rams were my team. There was just something that was captivating when I saw it on TV. And so I remember writing in a journal at a young age that that's who I wanted to be when I grew up. And, looking back, and obviously I'm a completely different person now, and I'm well aware of that the vision you have is not necessarily the path you take.
Say that. Say that again.
I said the vision that you have is not necessarily the path you take.
Yeah, really important.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's funny because when you have the vision, you're like, oh, I'm going to go be an NFL player. Like it's done. I just thought it at age 8, so it's going to happen. And the reality is you have no idea how to make that happen, right? And for all intents and purposes, there was no reason for it to happen for me in my path. But so I really thought about that at age 8, and my parents wouldn't let me play football until I was in high school. So I grew up kind of playing soccer and baseball primarily and exclusively. And then I got into high school, and a guy named Eric Dickerson was my hero, right? He was a Rams running back, Hall of Famer,
Right. Yeah.
6'3", like
Beast.
230. Yeah, he's a monster. And I was sure I was going to be the next Eric Dickerson. I'm like, it's done. And then I show up, put on pads and a helmet, and Chris Thomas is 5'5", 115 pounds, dripping wet. You know what I mean? The pads are supposed to go below your sternum, and they're like at my belly button. You know what I mean? It's like, and I had no idea how to do what I wanted to do. I just knew what I wanted to do. I want to be a great running back.
But you go back to that time in your life, and what I hear from you is, despite how you grew up, you had a belief in yourself. You had developed a self-efficacy about the fact that you knew what you wanted. You didn't know how you were going to get there, but you believed in yourself, and you saw a vision of what you wanted. And I'm sure that getting into high school at that age and that weight, and knowing that you were up against it, you just started getting behind some behaviors that football players get behind in order to achieve your goals. So there you are, not really stacked up the way you thought you would be, facing football for the first time. And what was your mindset, and what were the behaviors behind what you achieved, what you did next?
Yeah, it's funny because to backtrack a little bit, when I was a kid, I was fiery. So I was very skinny, very small, but I was much bigger than my size. So I hardly lost a fight because I could really get after you. If I got mad, I could really get after you. And it taught you to be really assertive in the things that you did, because you had to do that. I was playing with kids when I was 8 who were 14. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
you were 12. And it's like, they don't care that you're 8. If there's something they don't like about what you said or what you did, they're going to let you know that physically. So it's just kind of where we grew up and how we grew up. So ultimately, for me, one, I learned to be tough, but two, I think just naturally and innately, I had this competitive edge about me. And fortunately, I was gifted as an athlete. Looking back, I was raw, but I was very gifted as an athlete. And I was a kid, scoring 40 goals or whatever in the soccer season or whatever it was. And so at a young age, it never even dawned on me to question what it was that I wanted. I just expected when I showed up to play a sport, I'm going to get what I want. So because of that, I was very emotional when I didn't get what I wanted. Not to the point where it prevented me from getting what I wanted, but to the point where I would have a short-term breakdown and get upset and mad, but it would ironically get me more focused. It wouldn't make me cower and go into a shell oh my gosh, now I'm not going to get what I want. So, and I say that because, as you know, that's a huge part of why people end up falling short of their ambitions, because they become intimidated by the idea that they can't get what they want.
Yes, sir.
Right? So they
That's
retreat. Right. So I never had that in me. Even at a young age, even when I didn't get what I wanted, I was going to go fight for what I wanted because I expected it to happen. So now fast forward back to high school. I'm a freshman in high school. And even then, I don't think it dawned on me that I was small. I think I just realized, I don't know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? I'm trying to run through big guys and into other big guys who are bigger than me, and I really don't know how to do this because I've never done it before. So I don't know that I thought that I wasn't going to get what I wanted. I just was sort of just going through the process. And I ended up not starting at running back. I ended up being a third-string running back. And then I started at corner. And I was playing defense. It was all going fine. About halfway through the season, we're playing a school from Santa Barbara County, and it's a Saturday morning, mid-morning, and I'm asked to go back and catch a punt, something I'd never done in a game, something I don't recall doing in practice, but I was asked to go do it. Go back to catch a punt, completely misjudge it. The ball goes between my arms and my legs, and the other team recovers it on our 2 or 3 or 4 yard line. Come to the sideline, and the assistant head coach believes that I wasn't trying, so after that moment, he saw to it that I was benched for the rest of the year. So I lost my starting corner job. So that was my first year experience. And I only bring that up to say that because I've worked with athletes for 16 years, because I've had my own challenges with emotional obstacles and not getting what you want, I will say that too many young people today don't have the toolkit to contend with that obstacle, and instead they either quit a sport or they just accept that as their reality, right? And unfortunately, you can't win. You'll never discover the greatness that lies within you. You'll never discover the success that you want if that's your solution, right? And so for me, I don't know that I thought about it. I just know that I waited that long to play football, so I'm just going to show up and play the next year. You know what I mean?
Right.
But that was not an ideal first year by any stretch of the imagination. Second year, I grew. And I was 5'10", 140 pounds. I was playing JV. I was playing strong safety. intermittently played offense, but really a defensive guy. And I had a fine JV season, nothing to brag about. If I'm talking about how great my JV season was, then obviously I haven't accomplished a lot in life, right? So it was a normal JV football season. And then my junior year, I grew some more. I was 6 foot, about 162, 65 pounds. And I started on an almost all senior football team, which is unheard of for the most part. There were 3 juniors that started on this team, and nobody went both ways. So we had a ton of senior talent. I believe our defense was ranked like number 2 in the state overall. So I was surrounded by what I would call dudes. And I was playing free safety at the time and only played free safety because a guy who was better than me ended up tearing his ACL in, I believe it was spring ball or training camp. So I got the starting nod.
It's interesting, and just go back real quick because there's a lesson back in freshman year of getting benched. And, I think the simple lesson is, whether you believed in yourself or not, whether you knew it or not, you just said, I'm gonna keep playing football because this is what I want to do. And I know if I don't keep playing football, that the chances of playing professional football are going to be 0. So I don't know what's going to happen next, but I know the behavior that goes along with playing football is to stay on the team and not giving up. And I think that's, as you just said, it's so important. We don't know what the future is going to hold. We don't know what sophomore year is going to hold. We don't know what junior year is going to hold. But if we give up, all bets are off, right? And so you just kept moving forward, and there you end up, starting on this all-senior team junior year as a result of, and that's not the first time you had to make a decision to keep going in your life. But I think, we can build discipline in any part of our life, and so and I don't think we do anything in pattern that we don't get a payoff from. So for you, it was like, this is a path to my dreams. I know I got benched, but I'm going to keep playing football. Right on?
Right on. Yeah. We're often too quick to retreat. Right, we have this grand vision on what we want our experiences to be, and the moment that they're not, then we go, okay, well, I'm going to do something else or look a different direction because this is letting me down, right? And for me, it was like it was too new and too fresh. I mean, I hadn't experienced enough of it to be okay with walking away. I'm like, wait, this isn't the vision I had, so until I get the experience that I thought I was going to get, I'm staying around, right? Does that make sense?
That does. Man. So there you're on the senior team.
Yeah. Man. So now I'm on varsity as a junior, and that's kind of where I kind of found myself. So after that junior year, and I was surrounded by a bunch of dudes, and they certainly made me look a whole lot better than, quite honestly, I feel like I was. That being said, I got this national kind of recognition. I was, after that season, a blue chip player. By definition, that means you're virtually guaranteed a Division I scholarship guy. You're one of the best at your position. And I had all the letters coming to prove it. So literally got letters from everybody in the country except my dream school, which was Miami. That's where I wanted to go play football. But from Virginia to North Carolina to Texas to Oklahoma to all the Pac-12 schools, which were Pac-10 back then, I got letters from everyone, and then personal handwritten ones from a number of those schools. So, after my junior year, I'm like, shoot. The step one is done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm accomplishing step 1, which is I'm going to get a chance to go play for another 4 years beyond high school. And honestly, I would tell you this, it's different today because I think, athletes have a lot more guidance in terms of how to stay focused on their goals and their ambitions. But along with that can come pressure if not supported the right way. But back then it was like, once I started playing football, I never again thought about I need to make it to the NFL. That wasn't a thought in my head. I was just living in the moment, right? So I didn't know what was going to happen. I just was experiencing the now. So in the now, at that point, the now was great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like, cool. So after my junior year and into the summer, I pretty much thought I was going to write my own ticket. I knew I was going to, play on both sides of the ball my senior year. And that's what happened. I played free safety again. My senior year, I played wide receiver for the first time and got one taste of wide receiver and was like, I'm never playing defense again after this year.
Give me the ball.
Yeah, because I'm built to juke people. I love the idea of scoring touchdowns. I love the ball in my hands. I don't want to cover people, and I don't want to hit. At that point, my senior year, I'd grown a couple more inches. So I was now 6'2" instead of 6 foot. I was now 172 instead of 165. So I certainly wasn't intimidating or imposing, but I was slowly kind of coming into my own. So I loved wide receiver, finished having this great season, averaged 22 yards a catch, 10 touchdowns. We weren't smart enough to throw the ball a whole lot. So nonetheless, I still put up pretty good numbers and had 150 or something tackles as a free safety, which tells you about our team. If I'm tackling 150 times as a free safety, we're probably 4-6. And guess what our record was? 4-6. You know what I mean? So after the season's over, I'm done. I mean, I just did everything that was within my power to go get what I want. And the recruiting window opens up a couple months after the season. And at that point in time, there was no social media, there was no internet, there wasn't your own channels to go reach out to coaches. It all went through your high school coach. And the way the process worked was, university recruiters come to your school, they know who you are, and they ask the coach about you, and coach says great things about you. They yank you out of class. You sit down with a recruiting coordinator from whatever school, and hopefully they offer you, and there's your chance to consider the next chapter for you. So that window opens up, meaning the recruiting window, and I'm not talking to anybody for 2-3 weeks. And I really don't know how it works, why it's not working or whatever. So eventually I decided to call one of my assistant coaches who I was close to, defensive coordinator. And I called him up and said, hey, coach, I'm just calling about this whole recruiting thing. He said, yeah, how's it all going? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, how are your talks going with the schools? I'm like, what talks? He's like, the talks with the schools. How's it going? I'm like, what schools? He's like, Chris, the talks with the schools. How's it going? I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And he goes, wait a minute. So-and-so hasn't told you, meaning the head coach, right?
Right.
And I said, no. And he starts reeling off, UCLA, Washington, Oregon State, San Diego State. If I didn't say Washington, it was Washington or Washington State. It was virtually every Pac-12 school for the most part. Schools outside of that, Utah, Pacific, all these other schools. And he's like, you haven't talked to him? And I said, no. And he said, well, you need to go talk to the head coach to find out what's up. Well, he was not the most approachable person. So as a 17-year-old, you're really trying to figure out how you're going to approach an adult who is supposed to have your best interest at hand. And so it took me a day or two to figure out how I was going to ask him that question. And so as I determined, okay, this is the day I'm going to go approach him, that morning, one of my close friends came to me and said, hey, CT, I just wanted to tell you, so-and-so was in the field house when UCLA came to talk to you, and he overheard the head coach telling the recruiting coordinator that he didn't believe you could play D1, so they just left. So my head coach had actually said negative things about me in terms of my ability to play at that level, and then it all made sense. The second he told me that, well, that explained why I got to talk to none of the schools the assistant coach had told me had come to speak with me.
What was that realization like for you, man?
Oh, it's devastating.
Oh.
It's devastating because you feel totally cheated.
Yeah.
Because you put all this work in.
Right.
And certainly looking back, I could have worked harder, not in the sense of practice. When I practiced. But in the sense of, was I doing extra stuff outside of practice? No. Chris was playing 3 sports in high school. I was running track. I was playing soccer. So one season ran into the next, and you really can't prepare for any of them. You just show up. And fortunately back then I was athletic and gifted enough to be able to do well in all of it. So, and in the summer, I'm not supposed to be working. I'm supposed to be playing beach volleyball. So that's what I did. I'm in Ventura. You know what I mean? We moved to Ventura when I was 11. So in the summer, I just kind of did that. And then when you told me training camp was around the corner for football, I showed up. So
the path is already getting hard, man.
It was hard that, in the freshman year, it got hard without me realizing it, but because it's easy for a coach to pigeonhole you. Right, and for coaches to overlook you because you weren't visible when you were young, so why would you be visible later? So, and it happens a lot to athletes, I can tell you that. But that being said, yeah, this was the biggest obstacle because you're at a crossroad, you're at a major intersection where it's like, I might not be able to go on, so the dream's dead right now. And now all of a sudden, you go back to the dream. Yeah, it's been 4 years, but now I go back to the dream and like, wait, well, I thought I was going to have a legit chance to like somehow achieve this dream, but now like I'm at a dead end and I don't know what to do because the person who was supposed to have my best interest in hand didn't. So now what? I don't have a roadmap right now. So yeah, I was devastated, felt cheated. I was not happy. I was very angry. Right. And back then, I was a very edgy kid. So, I was that player who, if I didn't get what I wanted and I felt like it was because of you and you're a teammate of mine, I'm probably going to let you know about it. It wasn't until I was like 15 or 14 that I started managing those and really harnessing that energy in a constructive way with other people. It always supported me, but in terms of the leader that I needed to be to help other people become their best. But yeah, so now I'm sitting here going, I don't know what to do. There's only one school I applied to outside of football. It was Colorado. I got in, but I was 17, so I needed my mom to sign off on me going to Colorado, and she was not going to do it. She didn't want me to go out of the state. So fortunately, we live in an area where junior college football exists. So I was approached at my house. The head coach at Ventura Junior College came to my house, sat with my family, point blank just said, listen, here's the deal. Love you. Think you're a great player. If you come to Ventura College, we're going to pass the ball like 75% of the time. That's all he had to say. You know what I mean? Like, I'm there, right? So there was this glimmer of hope. So now I went from I'm thinking about quitting football, and I didn't emphasize that. I was an inch away from quitting football. An inch away from quitting football because one, I felt let down, and two, there were so many distractions. It was so easy to go, you know what? I'll just go to Ventura College, take some classes. A bunch of other people in Ventura are doing that too. We'll go hang out at the beach. I'll play video games with my buddies. We're going to go, play dunk ball in the afternoons, and maybe I'll do some homework in the meantime, and I'll figure it all out later. Like, that's a really comfortable thing.
Sure.
It doesn't challenge you, and it's easy, and everyone else is there with you. So where I was, it would have been really easy to do that, and I was really ready to do that. I was let down. So it's almost like it's your way of like getting back in this really warped sense of being let down. Like, all right, well then screw you then.
You don't
I'll
believe
just not
in me
care.
Yeah,
I'll just not care then. And at the end of the day, I lose, right? So fortunately, I didn't do that. And when the coach came to my house at Ventura College and told me that in front of my family, I'm like, shoot, all right, I'm excited again. Let's go. Go to Ventura College, show up for training camp. For the first 2 weeks, we're running the ball like 90% of the time. So clearly, I can see the writing on the wall. We're not going to be passing the ball 75% of the time. So here we are again. Now I'm let down again. And this happened, 4 months or 5 months after I was let down by my head football coach in high school. And so I just was over it. Approached the coach and said, listen, I'm out of here. He said, what's that? I said, I'm out. He goes, what's going on? And I said, you lied to me. He goes, well, what are you talking about? And I said, well, you told me that if I showed up here, we're going to pass 75% of the time. It's the only reason I came here. We're not passing the ball. And he's like, no, we're going to get to that. I'm like, no, we're not. He's like, trust me, I'm like, no, we're not. He's like, hey, trust me, we're going to get, no, we're not. He said, listen, you signed a contract that said you're committed here. And I said, I don't care what I signed. You sat in my living room with my family, told me this was going to be my reality, and it's not. So long story short, I ended up staying just because at that point, you really have no choice. Either keep playing football and trust that he's telling the truth, or I quit and then I have to go, well, what now? Right? So I stayed the course, and I will say this, junior college football across America, definitely in California, is probably a little step below like Division I football. I mean, I would venture to guess that there are a lot of junior college programs that could beat some smaller Division I programs for sure.
It's a competitive ball.
Very, very competitive, especially in Cali. I think from my time in my league, there were like 5 or 6 guys that made it to the NFL. So long story short, I stayed. We played 11 games. I was our number 1 wide receiver, and I had 18 catches. So a total letdown, right? I averaged 1.7 yards a game. 7 catches a game.
But we go back to freshman year. And what I'm starting to see is, and I think people need to understand this, is a pattern of disappointments in our life, things that we don't control, coaches, bosses, whatever it is that we don't control, but we always control our choice, our decision. And you learned freshman year what you learned senior year. So freshman year, benched, stay the course, play football. Senior year, same thing, not getting offers where you want to go, considering Colorado, stay the course. Not passing the ball like we're going to pass the ball. A lot of things out of your control. You keep betting on the outside world to deliver for you, and it's not. And Chris Thomas makes a choice, subconsciously or consciously. I believe things that we do somewhere in our subconscious mind is telling us that we've created a path, we're going to stay on it. You stay the course. So only 18 catches. We're not passing the ball 75% of the time, but Chris Thomas stays the course.
Yeah, and it was because it's just my DNA. That was my makeup. I'd love to sit here and say I was mature and I thought about, okay, I lose something if I don't stay the course. I think, to your point, subconsciously, Chris Thomas wasn't used to not getting what he wanted. So, I can't resolve that somehow I'm going to walk away and I'm not going to get what I want. I'm going to let you take something from me. That was kind of how I felt. So, yeah, I continued to stay the course, in part because, to me, there was no alternative. Yes, we all have an alternative. Some people turn to drugs. Some people turn to
The beach, the video games.
whatever. Yeah.
The
You know, and it
easier,
could be
softer
whatever.
way, right on.
Just being a victim. I'm just going to mire in my own, or drown in my own sorrow. Right. But that just wasn't really an option for me. So I
wasn't your
continued staying
identity.
the course. No, it never
It was
never
not
had
your
been.
identity.
Yeah, it never had been. And so I knew that after that freshman year, that was a huge loss for me, because you only get 2 years in junior college to try to make it to a 4-year school. And once those 2 years are over, if you haven't done what you needed to do, like, it's all over for you. So every year matters. And so I was really disappointed. I think I made all conference as a wide receiver just because I had 18 catches only, but I had 6 touchdowns. Right. So the next year I'm like, I'm out of here. I tell myself I'm going to transfer. There's a school up in Santa Barbara that passed the ball literally 85% of the time. Like, their third wide receiver had 65 catches. You know what I mean? Their top one had like 110. So I'm like, I'm out. So I went through all the paperwork, everything else. Turns out our coach no longer was the head coach. I don't know if he left or got fired or whatever. We got another coach who had been on the staff. He's now the new head coach. I went in to tell him I was leaving. He had, pleaded for me to stay and promised me it would be different. And I'm a loyalist. I grew up with a lot of the guys in high school that I was playing with at Ventura. So, everything in your body wants to believe them. You know what I mean? You're like, all right, I'm going to give this guy a chance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That guy let me down. That guy let me down. That guy let me down. But I'm going to give this guy a chance. And so I ended up staying. And unfortunately, they moved my position from where I was getting a lot of one-on-one matchups to the other side, because I could navigate better in traffic than the other starting wide receiver, who was very good too. And so I didn't get as much freedom, and because of that, I didn't get as many catches, and I only had like 35 catches that season. I did fine. I did good enough. I was also a return man my freshman year and my sophomore year, so I got a lot of exposure there, and I was very good. Ironically, here's the irony. I got benched my freshman year because I dropped a punt, right? Something I never rehearsed. By the time I finished my sophomore year in college at Ventura College, I had achieved being on the first team California JUCO All-American team as a return guy, right? So after my second year was done, that's the recognition that I got. It was national recognition for the most part, even though it was California oriented. It wasn't the National Junior College Association. It was the California JUCO Association. But 70% of the junior colleges that play football are in California.
That's right.
So that's why they have their own All-American team. So after that, I'm like, okay, here I am back on the D1 map. I've done what I needed to do, despite not really being given the chances that I thought that I would be given. So it's now the recruiting window again. It's opened up. And before it can even get started, I get called into the counselor's office. And they sit me down, and she says, you know what? There's a mistake here. Like, you're 3 units shy of being able to go play Division I football. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me, right? Like, just like you're excited all over again for D1 football and it becoming real, and then someone tells you you're 3 units shy to go play Division I football. The only way you can play Division I football is if you redshirt first. Well, no one wants a redshirt junior college football player. They want you to come in and play right away because you've had 2 years of college experience.
Right.
And so immediately you're no longer a legitimate prospect. On everybody's list, you're like, okay, if we don't get any other guy that we really wanted who can play right away, then we'll come back to you. Well, the chances are slim to zero. So just like that, again, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Here we go again, another obstacle. So it wasn't maybe 1 or 2 days after I found that out. You're trying to figure out, like, what now? Because honestly, Division II football wasn't even a thought in my head, right? And that was the one place I could play. I couldn't play Division I right away, being 3 units shy. I could play Division II right away. Well, out of nowhere comes a school, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. They come rolling through Ventura College on their recruiting trip down south, see me, they're like, who the heck is that guy? And the coach is like, you will not believe this. You can get that guy. And they're like, there's no way. He's like, oh, yeah, that guy's a blue chip player at a high school, California JUCO All-American. He can't go play Division I because he's 3 units shy. He can only play Division II right away. So you could get him. They called me that day. The recruiting coordinator asked if he could come to my house, came over and sat in my living room and said, you know what? We don't get guys like you. We don't get enough scholarships to give out full rides because we have to divvy them all up. But if you will come to Cal Poly, we're going to do everything we can and use you any way we can and give you a full ride. And so here you are yet again. And this is a hard thing for people to engage in, and it's trust, right? For so many of us, we don't allow ourselves to trust the unknown. We're unwilling to make ourselves vulnerable to the unknown, right? And so if you're unwilling to make yourself vulnerable to the unknown, then you have to accept where you are as your reality. And if I have to accept this as my reality, I then have to ask, okay, well, is this the reality that I want? You know what I mean? So it's like, so if the answer is no, well, then you really only have one choice, because if you retreat, you lose, right? And so that wasn't the fantasy. My fantasy wasn't, oh, I can't wait to go play Division II football one day. Like, that wasn't part of the map, right? When I wrote out my goals.
This whole map sounds to be very, and that's why, look, man, I was so excited to have you in here because you know how much I love you, and you know how much I have a lot of respect for what you do. But I mean, this is, when I'm talking about overcoming out loud and people see a guy with a Super Bowl ring, like how hard could his journey have been? And it's like at every move of every point of your life where you're trying to just get to your dream, the world's saying, yeah, but. And the only buddy, and I share this all the time with people, it's like the pen to the pages of the book of Chris Thomas's life has always been in his hand, man. And although these coaches were trying to take it from you, and we'll get into the rest of the world that did, you kept it in your hand and you kept writing the story. It's like, okay, here's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, and it's hard because, you feel as let down as anybody else. You know what I mean? You feel like a victim. You feel cheated. You feel disillusioned. That's the difference. I was disillusioned, not defeated, right? When you get defeated, that's when you find the abyss, right?
Yeah, you weren't hopeless. You still had hope.
Yes.
In the dream.
Yes. Like I was like, and at that point, honestly, CS, I wasn't, it no longer was even focused on the dream. You know what I mean? Like I only focused on the dream when it was like trying to find a chapter 2 from high school to whatever the next stage was, right? But obviously here's another chapter where I'm just trying to get to the next stage. So because I'm so far off the beaten path, the NFL isn't any longer even a thought really at that point. Like you couldn't be any farther from the NFL path. You know what I mean?
Right.
So sure enough, I go up to Cal Poly and it's nothing like anything I envisioned. I envisioned playing in front of crowds of 75,000 plus people, and I loved that, and it was never going to be pressure to me, and I love people watching Chris be great. And now I'm going to play in front of 7,500, on a big day, on a big night. And the facilities weren't what I expected or anything else, but what was real was they absolutely followed through with everything that they said that they were going to do. And they used Chris Thomas in every capacity possible. And by the time I finished my junior year there, I had a big year, and I was a projected 3rd to 6th round draft choice heading into the NFL. Heading into my senior year by the NFL. And, that place was exactly where I was supposed to be, by the way, in my life. And so nothing's an accident. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I will always say this. And if you don't ascribe to this, then you're not being real with yourself. Where you end up is exactly where you're supposed to be, so long as you're doing your part, right? The second you stop doing your part, then you can become a vagabond, right? So I kept doing my part. I kept having an obstacle, but I kept trying to find a way to keep moving forward. Because I kept doing my part, even though it wasn't the vision that I had, I found the place that was right for me at that stage in my life. And that place became a springboard for like the next chapter, right? Even though it wasn't what I wanted. Like none of that was what I wanted.
You epitomize the philosophy which I share all the time, which is you got to be great where you are. You're not going to be great where you're going. If you can't be a great Division II player at Cal Poly, you're not going anywhere. You got to be great where you are. Be a great financial analyst. Be a great salesperson at a car dealership. And if you want something more, continue to pursue it. But don't say I'll be better when. If I had a better boss, or if I had a better coach, or if I had better breaks, then I'd keep going. You never quit. You stayed the course, and you continued to do your part, which was to get behind the behaviors that went along with being a football player and a person wherever you were. It might have been unconscious. You might not have had this myriad of evolved thinking that you have now looking back revisionally, but it's like that's what you did. You just kept making being great where you were the priority for you. You got behind your behaviors and you did your part.
Yeah, I love the idea of being great. And the beauty was, one thing I will say, because we'll address this, I'm sure, right? And you just kind of said it, like, people always wait for like, well, if I just get there, then I'll be happy.
Yes.
It's like at the end of the day, like, no, the outside world is not where you're going to find happiness. Inside is where you're going to find happiness, and you'll change your experience in the outside world. Right. So, but yeah, it's like for me, what was so great for me was at that point in time, I didn't even really know what pressure was. I didn't know what judgment was. I didn't know what having to live up to some expectation was. I didn't know what trying to be perfect was, in terms of someone else's what's the right word? Expectation of me to be perfect, right? I didn't know what any of that was, because I was always really good at expecting a lot out of myself in a healthy way that I typically found that greatness or that success. So I never felt anything imposed upon me from an external force, right? Even to that point at Cal Poly, they were using me, and I'm like, yeah, you should use me. I don't feel pressure for that. Like, yeah, use me until I can't walk anymore, and then you can take me out for a few plays. Let me get my legs back, and then I'll come out and give you what I got.
And you did.
Right?
And so this winding path gets you to a 3rd to 6th round draft pick in the NFL. Out of all these storied obstacles, here you are.
So it got me there. At that point, I'm 6'2", 188 pounds or something like that. So I'm now getting strong. I finally lifted. I never did any of that stuff in high school. That summer leading up to my senior year, I ended up working with an NFL quarterback who had been in the NFL for quite some time at that point, and an NFL DB. So I spent the entire summer for 2.5 months working out 5 days a week against an NFL defensive back, and certainly took my lumps in trying to figure out how to navigate against a guy who was a bit more than a Cal Poly DB or a Division II DB. But I went into my senior season feeling like I was so ready to be the 3rd rounder, not the 6th rounder, the 3rd rounder. So I go back to training camp, feel amazing, and about 2, 3, 4 days into it, I pull my hip flexor, right? So, and you have to understand too, that gets a little uneasy, because at that point in time, if I backtrack, when my junior season ended and spring ball started while I was still a junior in college, that's when the dream became real. NFL scouts started coming to watch Chris Thomas practice, and there were 5 or 6, every other day that came to watch Chris Thomas practice. So for the first time ever, the dream was tangible. It's like right there, like, oh my gosh, like I found myself way over here forgetting that there was actually a dream that could be attainable. And now I'm back to this dream really being a reality, and it's tangible now. Before it was just on paper, before it was just on TV. But now I see the scouts who could determine whether Chris has value or not watching me practice. So it became real. And so that happened again when I came back for training camp my senior season, and then I got hurt. So then you start getting a little uneasy. You're like, well, I got to get healthy. Come on, you got to play. You got to get healthy, because you got to show them that you're this guy. So I still played, and I played the first 2 games at less than 100%. It was like 65, 70% my first game, like 80% my second, got 100% my third. And about somewhere between 7 and 9 minutes of my 3rd game, I went to go catch the ball on the sideline, and landed funny. A linebacker landed on top of me. Just like that, I suffered a 3rd-degree shoulder separation. I was done for the season. Right? So yet again, now that was the most devastated I'd ever been in my life. Because through it all, in spite of all the obstacles, I got on the horse and I rode again. And I always found a way to create success, in spite of the obstacles. And so I'm a God-fearing man as well. And so I always trusted that, like, God had my back. You know what I mean?
I'll do my part. You'll take care of the results.
Trust that, if I live the way I'm supposed to live right now, that you got my back. And so when I got hurt and I found out that my season was lost, right? Because you don't want to believe it. I hit the ground. Immediately I felt something on my shoulder, but you're like, I'm trying to work it out.
Yeah.
I'm lifting up my shoulder as much as I can. And they're like, hey, Chris, are you okay? I'm like, hey, just give me a second. You're like, ooh, this hurts, and before I knew it, I couldn't raise my arm in like 30 seconds. So something's not right. Then they tell you that you're done for the year. And that's when I felt devastated. I don't know that I felt defeated at that point, but I was definitely devastated, felt let down, and absolutely just wanted to like resist like anything good. I just was bitter. I was like, I'm tired of trying to be positive. Yeah. I'm tired of trying to be good. I'm angry right now, and I just want to say screw it all, and just retreat, and just be. I for a minute want to be everything it is I'm not supposed to be.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I do.
Because I'm pissed off, and I feel like you don't care, and I feel like I've just been cheated too many times. So, Yeah, I was devastated. And then, you don't really know what the future holds, right? And so I opted not to get surgery, which was an option. I got into a splint for about a month and a week. And when I got out of that splint, I went from 188 pounds to 172 pounds. So I like nothing like the NFL prospect. So now I'm getting out of my splint. I don't really know how the process works. I just know that if NFL teams are still interested, that I will have personal workouts come up when the season's over with. At this point, this is like November, right? And I think probably around February is when the personal workouts were going to start. And so I get out of my splint and I'm 172 pounds. So Chris can't even like start preparing to go get ready for NFL workouts. He just got to get back into like decent shape so that I can work out. You know what I mean? I'm trying to go through rehab and stuff. So it was really frustrating. I felt isolated because I really wasn't part of the team, and it had been years since I didn't feel like part of a team. So I felt alone. And I was on my own regiment that had nothing to do with my teammates. You know what I mean? And so I was trying to work out and get back into shape. And before I knew it, NFL workouts were there. And as I was trying to get ready for NFL workouts, I was feeling really bad. And at first I attributed that to the fact that, gosh, I'm just really out of shape. I haven't done much for a few months. But it continued. So even when I was trying to work out, I just wasn't getting in better shape. So I went to the health office and found out I had mono. So that was just another thing, right? So finally, my first NFL workouts here. You're all nervous about it. You don't know what it's going to be like. You know you're not your best. And here the day is, and it's raining, right? So I can't even go work out outside. My first NFL workout is in our basketball gym, where I'm running a 40 diagonal across the floor with like 7 yards to stop before I hit the side of the wall. And it was just a joke. And so you have to understand, I'm reasonable enough to know how illogical this is. You know what I mean? Because they don't say we're going to come back. It was for the Colts. So I remember this. They don't say they're going to come back. It's like, well, we're just going to make do with what we have. So aside from knowing I'm not at my best, now I'm like doing a workout that just is senseless. And I know I'm not going to be at my best in here. So that was my first workout. Left a bad taste in my mouth. The subsequent workouts weren't any better. I think I had 4 or 5 additional ones. And all of them were the same. Finally, I had a workout, I believe, for the Dolphins or the Bills. And I was about to do these running drills, right? Where you do these cone drills and they time you. And you have to understand, I'm at Cal Poly, which is an amazing space. It was a great place for me. But realistically speaking, while I'm at Cal Poly running on grass that's like 5 inches high, guys at UCLA and USC are running on, turf that's like a quarter of an inch high. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
trimmed up, ready to go.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And like at Cal Poly, they don't care about that. I'm running on soggy high grass. You know what I mean? And I knew that. And certainly that doesn't help your times out. So I'm doing this workout where I'm supposed to do these cone drills, and I put on my cleats and I'm ready to go. And so I go to do the first cone drill and I slip. And right when I slipped, it was like everything that had happened just kind of came to a head, right? Like everything in my past, 6 years had just flashed in my head, and just let down, pissed, victim, whatever. And I just felt like my blood boil, right? I'd had it. And so I go back. The guy's like, that's all right, just do it again. Try to take a deep breath. I go to run around this cone again and I slip again. So now I'm like, I can feel the rage, just happening inside of me. And I'm trying to keep my composure. He tells me I can go again. I line up again. And at that point, I'm not even paying attention to what I'm doing. I'm just angry. I go and I take off and I try to go around the cone again and I slip again. And at that point, it's just pure, just internal rage. I was just an inferno. And to this day, I can't believe I did this. I went to the side, I sat down and just started taking off my cleats. I just was done.
I remember this part of the story,
I was
man.
done. I literally was like, and I didn't say a word. I just was like, I'm done. And he said, excuse me, what are you doing? I said, I'm done. Didn't even look at him. I'm like, I'm done. He goes, excuse me? I said, I'm done. He goes, you sure? And I said, yeah, I'm done. He goes, okay. And he walked away. And fortunately, I had like a mentor there who was a coach who had just come that year. It's weird how I think God aligns you with people in your life. He had played in the NFL for a period of years. And he had just come back to Cal Poly to coach. So he obviously was familiar with the NFL and the process and everything else. And he gave me a few minutes and let me just kind of try to, unwind for a moment. And then he came over and said, hey, CT, I know you're upset. I know this has been frustrating. But I just got to tell you, man, if you ever do that again, like you might never play in the NFL because you might not play now. And so that's what you're left with. You're left with that reality. And you're left with the fact that you have something to do with that. You know what I mean? Like now I get to be the decision maker, right?
Am I really going to go against my DNA and quit?
Yeah, because I had it.
Right.
Like literally it was a straw that broke the camel's back, and I was bitter, I was angry. And it's funny because the more faith you have, the easier it is to blame, God. If I didn't have faith, then, who knows what would have happened to me, because I would have just had to be pissed off at the world. But, I guess on one hand, I was fortunate that I could just get pissed off at one person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because at that point, I'm pissed off at God. But then you're just like, okay, well, I'm going to trust that you know what the heck you're doing. You know what I mean? And putting me through all this. So against every bone in my body, I'm going to keep forging ahead, despite the fact that I feel like I'm just going to be let down again. And I did it. I just, picked myself up, forged ahead. I had one more workout where they come and work out your team for any guys that, are seniors and might have a chance. And I actually had a decent workout there. I ran some good 40 times. Your draft day comes, I don't get drafted, but 5 teams want to sign me as a free agent. And that to me was a shocker. To this day, I don't know how, because half of those teams never worked me out. It was the Chargers, the Buffalo Bills, who it couldn't have been the Buffalo Bills now that I think about it, that I walked away from. It had to be the Dolphins because the Bills wanted to sign me as a free agent. Kansas City Chiefs, Arizona Cardinals, and the New Orleans Saints. Keep in mind, you have to be represented by an agent, or you really need to be, because they're the ones that create the opportunities for you. And when Chris Thomas got hurt, every reputable agent that wanted to represent me disappeared, because really I'm a liability to them. They invest in you as a recruit. Right? So they're going to invest in this workout program and training program and nutrition program and everything else. And so why are you going to invest in something that seems like it's going to be a losing investment? So at that point, no one wanted to represent me. This one agent came out of nowhere, and he was the only guy who was willing to represent Chris Thomas. Well, why? Because he was new. And so, he would tell you he didn't know what he was doing, right? So here I am. I don't know what I'm doing. I have an agent. He doesn't know what he's doing. And we have 5 teams that want to sign Chris Thomas, and I chose the San Diego Chargers for no other reason than they were a California team, and I wanted to be in Cali, right? That was my evaluation, right? So not the best way to evaluate an opportunity when you might only get one. And so I'm super excited. I remember signing my first NFL contract and getting my little $5,000 signing bonus. I'm like, I'm rich. You know what I mean? Like, This is amazing. I haven't had $200 in my pocket ever. So $5,000 seemed like $1 million.
But on that piece of paper from a kid and a guy
became real.
And a guy who had lots of obstacles, I always say there's a set of behaviors that go along with being anything in life. And one of the things that go along with being a player in the NFL is showing up for the NFL workouts. And the day you decide I'll keep doing that, despite the fact that I don't feel like it. And isn't that true in life? It doesn't say, the gifts come if you keep doing that, but only do it if you feel like it. The real gifts come when you don't feel like doing it again. But you know that it's the behavior that goes along with what you want. So despite how you feel, you showed up for next NFL workout, got your spot as a free agent, and there you are signing with the San Diego Chargers. And the little journal note from a kid, in Pomona, is now signing his first NFL contract.
Yeah, and I was damaged goods. I get it. People have gone through really traumatic things in their lives, and on every level, we can relate to it. I mean, I relate to it just because, I was coming off of being, injured, and so I really was damaged goods. Like, I want this, but I'm damaged goods. I don't think there's anything in me right now that suggests that I'm going to find that now. Right? So, I mean, that's the way people feel when they retreat and they look for an outlet. And sometimes and oftentimes it's an unhealthy one.
Right.
My outlet, fortunately, was, you have to work harder. You have to work harder because you want to get as close to that as possible. And if you don't want to be because you didn't have it within you and you accepted that is your reality. Because we all have it within us.
We do.
Right?
Agreed.
It's a choice I get to make. So I chose the Chargers. I was so excited. I couldn't wait. It's the night before I'm going to fly down from San Luis Obispo to my first mini camp, and I go eat at Presto Pasta. Nothing against Presto Pasta. This isn't a negative advertisement against Presto Pasta, but I get food poisoning. You know what I mean? So it's the night before I'm going down for my first camp. I get freaking food poisoning, right? So it was so just befitting of like my journey, right? So I'm not feeling that great going down there. I arrive at the airport. I'm in this van with a bunch of other guys from all over the country. My first time being around guys from all over the country. And we're driving up to the stadium, and that's when it really becomes really like, oh my gosh, I'm about to go into Jack Murphy Stadium, which is Qualcomm or whatever it is now, as an actual player. Like, I'm a player. And you pull into the tunnel, and you all get out of the van, and you're walking through the tunnel to the locker room. You're like, man, this is crazy. You walk in the doors into the locker room, and you see, Junior Seau, who eventually is the Hall of Fame linebacker and, one of the best in the game. And Gil Birdie was a great Pro Bowl DB at the time, and other guys you've watched on TV. You're like, dude, I'm going into this. This is me. Like, I'm one of these guys. And, you turn the corner, and then there's like the rookie area locker room, right? Because keep in mind, when they initially sign you, they can sign 90 guys. Eventually, they got to whittle that down to 53 active guys, and I think 59 or 61 total guys. So, because they get guys on the practice squad, after they get their final roster to 53, they can add like 6 or 7 guys to the practice squad, which means you basically are redshirting. You always practice, you just don't dress out for games. So, they have to come up with, different areas of the locker room to create lockers. So we turn the corner, and it's a rookie area. I'm like, this is crazy, and I look at my locker, and there's this goodie bag on my stool, and it's got 2 hats and 2 polo shirts and a couple regular shirts and shorts and all the San Diego gear. I'm like, dude, I had to buy my own cleats at Cal Poly. What I mean? I wore my own pads at Cal Poly, right? Like this, I've never been given anything, right? So I'm all excited, and then I looked up and I saw my number, my jersey number that they gave me, and it said number 47. And that hit me like, a hammer to the face, because I knew immediately that was not indicative of a wide receiver number. So to me, without even knowing much about the NFL, I knew like that probably said something about how they viewed me. And at that point, I didn't know how many receivers were there. I don't even know I knew how many they were keeping on their roster at the end of the day. But I knew that wasn't a good sign. I go into our first meeting. Right out the gate, the coach says, get ready, man. The game's about to become 85% mental and 15% physical. And I don't believe anybody knew what that meant, because all of us, for the most part, got there because we were great athletes. And because we were great athletes, we could be more dynamic on the bigger stage, and that's why you like us. And so we're all here as that person. And now you're saying 85% of the game is going to be mental? Like, I don't even know what that means. I just know that once we break from our meetings, I'm going to go out on the field and go try to out-athlete somebody else, right? But we're sitting in the meeting room, and then we break up into our individual meetings, and I'm now in the wide receiver room, so I get to see how many wide receivers are, and there's 16. And in that, you start hearing the chatter and talk and stuff like that, and you realize, okay, well, now I just heard like they're only going to keep 5. Well, there's 11 of us rookies, and they have 5 guys that were there that were signed the year before. So then you just kind of start doing the simple math. You're like, well, wait, there's 16 guys here. There are 11 of us rookies. 5 guys are returning from last year. Well, if they like those 5 guys last year, then why wouldn't they like those 5 guys this year? And why wouldn't they be the 5 guys on the roster? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If they're only keeping 5. So, you go out to your first camp you go out to your first practices, and I don't know how it all works. I just know this, that for 5 practices in 3 days, Chris Thomas stood and watched everybody else play football. I literally got 2 repetitions of anything. So talk about feeling like the kid on the other side of the fence, like waiting for you to ask him to play. For the first time in my life, like that's how I felt. I felt like an absolute scrub, particularly because they gave me number 47. So it almost was like you were being, isolated, and people were, almost to the point where like you thought people were looking at you going, yeah, there's a guy who'll never make this team. The veterans had been there like, oh yeah, right. I know that guy will never make this team. And it's almost embarrassing. You know what I mean? And I got 2 repetitions, and then my first rep, I got jammed out of bounds during this press drill by one of their starting corners. Keep in mind, that's the first guy I'd gone against in like 7 months, right? From Division II Cal Poly to starting NFL corner.
Here we go.
I'm like trying to like get my first rep in, and he jams me out of bounds, and I'm still like 176 pounds at this time. Okay, haven't gotten my shape back yet and my strength back yet. And then my second rep was the last practice where I got in for a 12-yard route and got the wind knocked out of me by Junior Seau. So after that camp was done, I remember going to the airport. My best friend who I lived with wanted me to call him on the phone. He couldn't wait to hear about how the camp went. I ring him up. He's like, CT, how'd it go? I'm like, dude, I'm getting cut. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, bro, you don't get it. Like, this was a disaster. They gave me number 47. No one else has a number like that. Everybody else had a single digit team number, 80-something number. I was the only guy with a number like that. They got 16 wideouts. They're only keeping 5. They got 5 guys coming back from the year before. They gave me 2 reps in 5 practices, bro. I got jammed out of bounds and got the wind knocked out of me by junior sale. There's no way I'm coming back. So I was really disheartened. I was going to go back up to school. And honestly, I just expected to get a phone call that said, hey, don't come back. I knew there was about a month between that camp and the next camp, and I had no choice except to try to keep progressing. So I realized I needed to, compete against some DBs. So I found some guys at Cal Poly to go against. I started getting stronger, but more than anything, I started getting mentally stronger.
Tell me about that.
That is one thing that I always had. Some of the things that I was going to need in order to overcome the obstacles I naturally had. I was ferocious in my competitiveness. I wasn't willing to accept my reality that you told me was my reality is my reality. I was more interested in creating my own and a new one if it wasn't what I wanted. So I had that in me. I loved being strong. I loved being formidable. I loved competing. I loved winning. I hated losing, like things that just you need in order to survive and compete at that level, to make a dream like that where 0.0012% of the population will accomplish that. I had those traits and those attributes. And then I didn't realize that at the time, but those were some of the psychological attributes that really define the mental game. So while I was competing, I was getting more mentally strong. I was feeding those again,
right?
Those attributes again. And so when I went back for my second camp, they actually cut 3 guys. So now we had 13 wide receivers. I wasn't one of the guys cut. I got more reps, did more with them because I was in better physical and psychological shape. And then I got to go home after that camp for about 2 months. And it was there that, I think I've shared this with you, that I had this epiphany that changed my world. It changed my possibilities. And it changed the influence that I would eventually have in other people's lives because I've experienced what they've gone through. At that point in time, when I went home accepting my reality. I didn't embrace it. I accepted it. My reality was, okay, when you go back to training camp, you're going to get 1 rep every practice. That's it. They're going to give you 1 rep. And with that 1 rep, you got to show them why you need another rep. And you don't have the ability to be ordinary. You can't be like everybody else. You got to be extraordinary. So I made a conscious choice to challenge my threshold, to do things in the way that I trained, where when I reached a point where I was exhausted, I reached a point where I felt like I couldn't go further, I consciously forced myself to keep going. And I knew that I was doing things that honestly, even at that level, that other people would not, because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to get out of your comfort zone by that much to where it hurts. But I was open to that. And I was conscious. It was an intention. It was intentional. And so I did that every single day. That was my mission. That was my goal. And that became a goal so that I could go back and earn another rep to show them why I deserved that other rep.
This is where you know how much I gravitate to that part of your story, because I know for so many years you had been the victim of circumstances, and a lot of us can feel like victims. But when I heard you flip this switch to now, I know I'm going to get an opportunity, and I'm no longer being the guy that says, why am I not getting the other opportunities, but I'm getting this one, and I'm going to play for this one because it's the one I got. And I tell you, that to me is the mental conditioning that it takes to go from, victim to victor, from, down to out to up, because you just said to yourself, I'm going to reframe this opportunity from being a dig on me or for being a negative to me to being exactly what I want. I want that 1 rep because that's what gets me another rep. And I think, man, I mean, I love where the story goes from here, but I think, as we've talked about, that is such a turning point.
Oh, well, I'm going to elaborate on that because we are so ready far too often to be the victim of a circumstance and to, bemoan it, right? And to say, well, now I'm not going to get what I want. So that's where we become disillusioned, right? And then the second you become disillusioned, then you take energy that is needed to support the ambition and you divert it away into already projecting into the future that you're not going to get what you want. So it affects the way that you work for it.
That's it.
So you and I are going to work differently. You know what I mean?
I
Because
do.
I've accepted that. I've accepted it. I can either accept it or I can become a victim to it. Guarantee you the other guys I was competing against went home pissed off about not getting more reps, about I'm a dude, don't they know I could beat out this other guy, blah, 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 blah. You don't control any of that. What I accepted was that this one thing is in my control, and I'm going to control it. And when I control it, I'm going to do things that other people I believe won't. So, yeah.
So there's an event, there's an outcome. You don't control either of them. You control your response.
I control,
and that's what you jumped on.
That's exactly it.
Yeah,
I control my decision, right? And so in all of that, keep in mind, I was doing that to show the coaches why Chris Thomas deserved more opportunities.
Sure you were.
And all of that, though, here's what happened. By the time those 2 months were over, I had really turned myself into a guy I'd never been. And the reason I say that is because it wasn't that I hadn't worked hard. There was never anything in my life that had challenged me to become more than what I was. Because up until that point as an athlete, I was always enough. I could always get what I want just doing what I was doing. But now for the first time, someone's telling me that you're not enough. 47 tells me that I'm not enough. So now I have to do something to turn myself into someone I've never been. So I challenged myself to go to places I'd never visited. So I remember one morning waking up. It was 2 days before I was going to go to training camp. And I woke up, looked in the mirror, and obviously the anxiety, I don't want to say anxiety in a negative way, but the nerves and everything about going to camp, and
sure.
This month and a half,
right, yeah.
This is going to determine the dream, right? So I would say nerves. The nerves are starting to happen, and all you can think about is, oh my gosh, I'm going to training camp in a month and a half from now. I'm going to know my future. And so I woke up this one morning, looked in the mirror, and it was like a lightning strike. It literally was this epiphany where I was like, whoa, I love who I'm seeing right now. I love the guy I turned myself into. This feels amazing. I can even feel right now my heart beating a little faster because it was an amazing moment, man. It was just this amazing revelation to me. And in that moment, I realized I won. You know what I mean? I did all this because I wanted to show somebody that I was good enough. But I realize now that the purpose of this was to discover the greatness that lied within me when I didn't question it. And I was willing to make myself vulnerable to the unknown. Because the unknown's still there. But what I know is that I'm ready to go get what I want in the unknown. And if I can't get that, you cannot take away what I've created. You know what I mean? Because this person is real. This person is now visible. You know what I mean? This person has a different energy. This person has a different outlook. This person has a different fearlessness. You know what I mean? This person has a different conviction. You can't take that away from me. I'm that person now, and I've chosen to be that person. So it changed the definition of why I was doing what I was doing. Immediately became about, okay, when I go to training camp, it's not about trying to win them over. It's about Chris going out for the one moment they give me and being the dude that I just created. For me.
For me.
For me. That's it. I'm going to do it for me. And I want to go against the best guy because I'm built and ready to go beat the best guy. So I was fearless.
Your
I wasn't
identity wasn't in the number. Your
Nothing.
identity wasn't in the position.
Nothing.
Your identity wasn't in the team. Your identity was built from within.
That's it.
And that's who was going to serve you.
And I changed the energy towards the number.
Sure.
I wasn't ready to be offended in a fight, mentality regarding the number. At the time when I got the number, they caught Chris in a vulnerable state. You know what I mean? I was coming off of being hurt. I still was not even close to back to where I needed to be.
Yeah, your mind was saying, do I even belong here?
Yeah.
I'm damaged goods.
Yeah.
This
and
is the
you're giving me
narrative.
47.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I'm like, damn, I guess maybe that's who I am.
Confirmation bias. We're looking for the things that prove the story we're
Yeah.
telling about, and they're stacking up until
That's
you
it.
changed them.
Yeah,
right?
because they caught me in a vulnerable state of mind.
Yeah.
Right? That wasn't a healthy one. But again, my DNA is not to accept that as my reality, or not to embrace that as my reality. It is my reality, so I have to accept that, but I'm going to change my reality to create what I want. So when I went to training camp, how I thought it was going to play out is exactly how it played out. Got one rep. With that one rep, I did exactly what I was prepared to do, right? And I don't say that lightly.
No, you
know
don't.
what I mean?
I don't.
What I was
do know.
prepared to do. You have to prepare to get what you want. I just happen to be talking about football right now, but it could be anything in life. And so I prepared myself. I conditioned myself for that. And I did exactly what I was supposed to do and made them go, wow, I wonder if we can do that again. And this is not a hyperbole. I was the low man on the totem pole. Literally, when I first got to camp, when I first got to my first camp, back when we had 16 wide receivers. But as I started displaying my talent, one they had never thought that they were going to see, because I wasn't the same guy who came in, they started having to take notice. And as they took notice, they started giving me some other guys repetition, and then some other guys repetition, and then some other guys repetition. So when it was supposed to be, Johnny's and Victor's and whoever else's rep, it was, Chris, come up here. And so I would get someone else's rep and do the same exact thing. And three preseason games went by, and none of us rookies played in those three preseason games because they were looking at the 5 guys who were there. 2 of them in particular, because those 2 guys didn't play the year before. And one guy they had drafted in the 3rd round, and they wanted him to be this like return guy and their deep threat. They wanted him to be that guy, right? And he could flat out fly. He just couldn't run a route. He could blaze, but he couldn't run a route. And the reason they drafted him in the 3rd round is because he could run. But they figured out very quickly he couldn't run a route. So 3 preseason games in, they have to cut down from 90 to like 65 guys. And they cut every wide receiver but 6, and I was one of the guys left standing. And it was me and this other rookie. They ended up cutting the guy I just described. It was me and this other rookie who they loved. They did not try to hide it from day one. They asked him to come to meetings early. They asked him to stay late after practice and catch with a 3rd-string quarterback. They wanted him to learn the plays better than everybody else. They didn't ask 47 to do that or anybody else.
Right.
They only asked him. And so I knew they liked him. And so, again, you're left to go, I've done everything I can. I feel like I played great, but I still feel like the odds are against me making this team because they want him to be here. The last preseason game was against the Niners up in San Francisco at Candlestick Park. And I'll never forget running through the tunnel. And I'm jogging through, and there's a picture of it with me jogging through. And my family was in the stands off to the left, watching me run through the tunnel. And I remember thinking, like, this might very well just be it. Like, this might be the last time I ever get to experience, like, what the NFL is. But at least I got to experience it. I was here. And here I am in, like, legendary Candlestick Park, because at the time the 49ers were the dynasty organization, with Hall of Famers, in their lineup. And although I wouldn't play against them, I'd certainly see them out on the field. So it was like surreal. And I knew I was going to get the 4th quarter to myself, along with this other rookie, to go prove like what we could do. That's what happened. We got the 4th quarter. They tried 5 or 6 times to get him the ball. And for whatever reason, he couldn't make a play. He never dropped a ball. He slipped, underthrown, overthrown, deflected. He just couldn't make a play. Late in the 4th quarter, I'm running a route from the slot on the left side down the middle of the field, ball's thrown in the air. And make no mistake about it, you recognize how monumental the moment is. It'd be a lie to say that you didn't feel the weight of the moment, because no one around you is going to let you ignore the weight of the moment, right?
Right.
In spite of all the plays I made, I'm like, this is a huge play. So it is so fascinating how your history flashes in your head over the course of the 1.5 seconds or 2 seconds it takes for the ball to get to you. And you're just recalling everything and every moment and who you were and the little skinny kid and, all the work you've put in. And it's coming down to this moment. And at that point, it was the only ball I'd gotten thrown to me in an NFL game. So I jump up, I catch it, I fall down for like a 26-yard gain. The game was over shortly thereafter. The next day was going to be cut day. I was roommates with the other wide receiver. So when the phone rang from the Grim Reaper who said, one of you guys bring your playbook, it's over for you, we knew it was one of us, because we're the only 2 guys in the room, you know what I mean? And it's one of those situations where you almost don't want to answer the phone, but you do want to answer the phone, right? The last thing you want is for him to say, hey, the phone's for you. But then you're like, I don't want to answer it, because if it's for me, it's like my heart's going to start racing, you know what I mean? So it's the afternoon, and I joked about this. I think you've heard me say this, but it is one of those days where you tell everybody do not call my hotel room. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you call my hotel room, I'm fighting you. You know what I mean? Like, don't call the hotel room, right? So sure enough, that afternoon the phone rings. And like the chills that go up your spine, I can't, it's so hard to put that in perspective, because it is such an extraordinary achievement just to be there. One of 1,700 guys that eventually be 1,300 guys, the 1,340 guys. on the planet get a chance to play pro football. So, literally you're 0.0012% of the population, whatever it is. And that's the football population. It's smaller than that.
Yeah, it is.
For like the overall population, right? So that's the football population of people who start playing football at a young age. But that being said, it rings and I'm the one closest to the phone. So I answer it and hello. And sure enough, it's hi, this is Marty Herney, right? And he was the assistant general manager who was the Grim Reaper. He's the guy that calls to say, bring your playbook.
The cut man.
The cut man. So, I said, oh, hi, Mr. Herney, how are you? He's like, fine, how are you? And I'm like, yeah, I've never been better. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I'm wonderful, man. I can't, no one's ever been better than me right now as I await my future and whether I'm done or not. So, long story short, he says, listen, I want to tell you something. Let me backtrack. I will tell you that the second we started talking, I anticipated he was going to tell me that I was cut. He was going to say something to the effect of, hey, man, you've worked really hard. We appreciate it, but, coach wants to see you bring your playbook. For no other reason, just that I thought that's what was supposed to happen because nothing's gone right for me. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
of course.
So he says, hey, Chris, I just want to tell you that we like what you've done. We like you a lot. And because of that, we're going to keep you here. I need to talk to Wade. So, I said, hey, Wade, phone, bro. So it's like, the phone's for him. You got to give it to him. And in all seriousness, it's really a horrible thing to watch somebody experience because I've been there. And he had to hear the words of bring your playbook. Coach wants to see you. He would never be in a training camp again. And that would launch my 8-year NFL career. And so it's interesting because, when you are experiencing life, like life doesn't often stop and allow you to celebrate it. It keeps going. And so you have to keep going with it. You know what I mean? Because there's something around the corner that's going to happen again, either in your favor or not in your favor. And for me, it was like, just as you're trying to appreciate the accomplishment and overcoming all these obstacles, now there's a whole new set of obstacles waiting around the corner for you that you never anticipated coming.
And how important was it for you to have stacked up a bunch of mental reps at this, knowing what you were going into? And I know what we're going into because we're going into a lot more judgment. We're going into a lot more challenges and a career that I love the fact that we know the end of the story with you, but like I said, we're still not at the top of the mountain. How important was the mental conditioning that you had developed, that identity about who you were now, and the fact that, what I call the pen to your life was never, ever going to leave your hand in terms of, where this story goes? How important was it that you had that kind of identity and those mental reps?
It is the only reason that I made it.
Yeah.
It is the only reason, because what I neglected to say was that as I was training in that summer before the training camp was to take place, my first training camp, I was so ready to subscribe to what we've been conditioned to accept as our reality, what we've been conditioned to accept as the judge and the jury, which is our world around us, right? I had these ambitions. The ambition was to eventually make an NFL team. And here I am as one of 1,700 guys on the planet, even getting a chance to fulfill the dream, right? So that in itself is extraordinary. Yet, before I went home and started, transforming the person that I was, both physically and mentally, I was ready to accept that if I didn't make it, I was going to be a failure. I was truly ready to accept that, man, if I don't make it, man, I failed. And people are going to think I'm a scrub. They're going to think that I wasn't good enough. And you know what? They're going to be right. I mean, and it is ludicrous that we would even allow ourselves to subscribe to something like that when you have achieved the extraordinary.
Right.
But from a young age, it's how the world conditions you to think. And it's how we've been conditioned to, qualify ourselves by the perception of other people. Right? And this is what's scary about having goals, right? It's what's scary about having goals is once I set the goal, then it's like, well, now I have to make that, because if I don't make it, then I failed, right? And then I'm nothing, because the world's going to tell me that I failed and that I'm nothing. At least that's the perception. If it's not the reality, it's definitely the perception.
It is,
right? And sadly, it is the reality for a lot of people. You know what I mean? Like people around them are like, yeah, dude, you didn't do it. You know what I mean? Oh, he wasn't good enough or whatever. You hear the jeers or whatever in the background. And I was ready to accept that. And so probably the greatest value of me challenging my threshold and diving into the extraordinary was that I completely eliminated the ability for me to subscribe to that anymore. I was like, that is so not my reality. I am a dude who's achieving the extraordinary, and there's nothing you can say to make me believe that that's not my truth, right? So I can't emphasize that enough, how important that is, because I was really ready to buy into that. But because I was in a different mental space at that time, it changed my reality. It changed the definition of success to me. I was achieving success before I even went to training camp to try to make their team. I had already achieved greatness, and greatness was internal, right? And I could see it. It was visible. I didn't need an NFL, uniform on Sundays any longer to tell me that. Like, it was internal. And that's where people get lost, is they're looking for that qualification externally. The world's not interested in cooperating with you, though.
It is.
You know what I mean?
Do.
So it's brutal, So I will say that it is the only reason that I was able to sustain, because you got to understand, CS, it's every day, man. You are scrutinized every day in a training camp and at the NFL level. Like, you're scrutinized when you're a guy like Chris Thomas every day. I could catch 10 balls and you drop one, and people could be like, see, he can't play. You know what I mean? It's like, and so that's your reality. And as illogical as it is sometimes, it's your reality. So you can't run from it. So you have to learn how to function in it. And so, you can't, I learned to live in a moment for 7 seconds that I could just be Chris Thomas for Chris Thomas. And Chris Thomas was a dude and was a beast. So I know that Chris Thomas, if I stay in my zone, is going to be phenomenal right now.
Can we break? It's 1:30. I got a quick call. I don't know, what's your time? And so now we're talking about the beginning, actually, right? So now and I love that you just said that life just keeps coming. If we're going to go through this thing, life's just going to keep coming. So this is the start of what you always wanted, and you now with the Chargers, preseason's over. You made that catch. You've worked on your mindset, and you're going to need every bit of it now. Take us to the next chapter.
Yeah, so I'll fast track this to the point where I think I became deeply affected by my circumstance. My first 2 years in San Diego, I felt like I should have played, but I really didn't. So I was frustrated by my second year there, and we had gone to the Super Bowl. We played the Niners, and they just destroyed us. But after that season, I was questioning whether or not I still wanted to play. It was just a lot. And so I kind of took some time to detox. I was, did nothing for about a month and a half after the season, like literally. And then I get a call from my agent saying, hey, the Bengals want to work you out. Well, at the time, the Bengals were a really terrible franchise. So It's not a great compliment going, hey, the Bengals really want you. You know what I mean? I told my agent, listen, I'm in no shape at all to go work out for anybody right now. He's like, well, they really like you, but they just want to see you in person. I'm like, well, I guess I'll do it, but tell them I don't want to run a 40-yard dash or anything, because that you have to prepare for. Hadn't done that in 2 years. Fine, Chris. He tells them, they agree, no worries, just come. We just want to watch you run routes. I show up, first thing they asked me to do is run a 40. So I run 2 horrible 40 times against my own will, really. I didn't want to do it, but I didn't feel like I was in position to say no. So I run 2 horrible times and then have a terrible workout. I'm just gassed running route after route after route. They cuss my agent out. I come back and my agent's like, hey, I told you guys he wasn't ready. You didn't want to wait. So it is what it is. I go home, and now I'm kind of shook up, because one of the reasons that I didn't play in San Diego was they tried to tell my agent that Chris has everything. We're just not quite sure he's fast enough, which was a crock, and I knew it because I was running by everybody in practice that everybody else was. But San Diego was a real, I want straight line track fast guys. And I wasn't that guy, but I was definitely fast. So then all of a sudden I run a 4.7 flat and 4.7 240, something I hadn't done since 9th grade. And I'm like, dear Lord, if I'm that slow, then they're right, and I'm out of the league. So I go hire the speed coach in Irvine and tell him what happened and said, hey, if I'm that slow, I'm really out of the league. He says, let me watch you run. He watches me run for 10 minutes, comes back and says, you can flat out run. Your technique's terrible. We'll fix it. A month and a half later, I run a 4.41 on grass. The 4.7 flat was on turf, which should have been faster. So I don't know what's next. I just know that I'm prepared to look good if another opportunity comes. And then the draft happens, and all of a sudden I get 2 or 3 phone calls to work out. My agent tells me one of them's with the Niners. Go up there, and I'm supposed to. They already tell my agent we're not signing him. He's going to fly up for a day, work out, He'll fly home if he's good enough to us, and we'll put him in a Rolodex in case someone gets hurt in training camp, right? So you do it. And it can be nerve-wracking because, when you go up there, there's 12 guys with their arms crossed just watching you work out. It's just you and a quarterback, and that's it. You know what I mean? And it's really quiet. You can't run from the stage, right? And so I'm there, and I just, again, at that point, I learned to harness the mind when I was engaging in activity. So, I was aware of just being in my own space. So I went up there and had like the workout of my life after having a horrible workout, 2.5 months, 3 months prior. And it was so good that the vice president, who was Dwight Clark, came up and said, that was a phenomenal workout. You can flat out fly. Are you a 4.3 40 guy? I'm like, no, I'm a 4.4 guy. He goes, listen, love what I saw. We want to see more of you. So would you mind staying for the weekend so we can see you? Right? So here I was supposed to jump on a plane in a couple hours, and now I'm being asked to stay.
Yeah, I want to really emphasize that, there was something that you decided to do, though. You had a bad workout. You recognized that you weren't achieving the results you wanted, and you decided to go get a speed coach, and you took some direction. You asked for some help and said, there's something that's not adding up for me, and I don't know how to fix it. And so it's no surprise you went up and had the workout of your life because you didn't stay stuck in what happened with the Bengals. You didn't stay stuck in the results of that workout. There was, once again, a set of behaviors that went along with improving the things that you weren't happy with. Even though you hadn't been working out, you got behind those behaviors, got a speed coach, and now Dwight Clark's telling you flat out fly.
Yeah, and keep in mind, CS, I didn't get one compliment in San Diego in 2 years that I was there. They tried to downplay what I was. You know what I mean? It was a crock. I knew it was a crock when the personnel guy told my agent that about he can do everything, he's not fast. I'm like, that's a crock. Come watch practice. Well, I'm running by everybody else is. So they're just making excuses. But then again, yeah, you have a bad workout and there's that moment of doubt. Like, well, maybe I am what they said that I was. And then you go, well, wait a minute, whether I am or not, I'm not willing to accept that. So I need to do something to create a different end result. Right. So that's basically what happened. And I wasn't afraid to ask for help. And the benefit of that was I got a chance to now stay for a weekend if that's what I wanted. I was supposed to do a couple workouts that following week. So I talked to my agent. He said, as long as I don't wear you out because you have these workouts next week, then that's fine. So I agreed to stay. And they then said, okay, well, you got to hang out at the facility for a while because now we got to get you a hotel room and find a jersey number for you. Because at that point, and cut a guy. At that point, they could only sign 90 guys. They had signed all their 90 guys. So they had to cut somebody who was there in order to make room for me. And even for the weekend. So long story short, I'm at the facility just hanging out, and the D coordinator comes up. And he asked me if I would help him work out this DB who was a starting DB at one point in time for the Vikings and the Saints in the afternoon. He was coming in to work out. And to be honest with you, I wanted to say, hell no. I just had the workout of my life. Are you kidding me? I don't want to go work out again. I might screw that thing up, and they might tell me to go home again.
Dropping the mic. Yeah, I'm good.
I'm done, dude. I'm saving the rest of me for tomorrow. You know what I mean? But long story short, I couldn't say no, so I said yes. Well, the same 12 people that were watching me work out on my own.
You could have said no.
Oh, if I would have said no, I would have gone home.
That's
you
right.
Know what I mean?
That's right.
Yeah. So yeah, for me, that's not an option, right?
There we go.
But so I go work out against this guy, and he's a former starting corner in the NFL. The D coordinator had brought him in because it was one of his former players where he used to be. And I did all these releases against this guy where this guy lines up right in front of me. The coach gives me a route to simulate. They don't throw the ball. They just want me to run the route. And I just torch this guy. He can't get his hands on me. And I know the people, the scouting and the player personnel guy and all the other people who were there had to be going, who the heck is this kid? He had that workout earlier. He's doing this right now to a starting DB. Who the heck is this kid that we've never heard of? So the next day in practice, they give me a bunch of reps because they're trying to figure out if I'm worthy of staying longer than a weekend. Because all I signed was a weekend contract. It wasn't a real contract. It was a 3-day contract. And I basically do exactly what they saw me do to anybody they put in front of me. And so in the afternoon of that first day, they pulled me to the office and said, we want to offer you a 2-year contract. A signing bonus we said we'd never give you. And it just shocked me because keep in mind, they were the reigning world champions. They had just won the Super Bowl. They were the dynasty organization. And here I am like showing up like that in that organization.
And told your agent, we're not signing this kid. He's going to fly out for a day.
Yeah, that was the original plan. So I was incredibly honored, but at the same time, it was not a good situation because they only kept 4 wide receivers, and the 4 were pretty much cemented. They had Jerry Rice, the best receiver on the planet. They had this guy, John Taylor, who was a 12-year vet, made multiple Pro Bowls. He was a stud, rooted in. He was on his last year. Like, he was retiring after that year, but nonetheless, he was going to start. This other third down guy that they loved named Nate Singleton, and then this guy they drafted in the first round named J.J. Stokes. He was the 10th pick of the first round that year that I arrived. So they had their 4 guys. So it didn't look hopeful for me. And so as honored as I was, you have to be realistic. And so as I was sitting in the lounge on day 2, the D coordinator came up to introduce himself, and it was actually Pete Carroll. No one really knew who Pete Carroll was at the time. He's now the Seahawks coach. And he sat down and said, listen, I know we didn't get a chance to talk much, but I just wanted to tell you something. I've been around a long time. I know talent. You got a ton of it. I think you could be a successor to Jerry Rice with that kind of talent that you have. He's getting older. You could learn from him. I think that this could be a great place for you. I'm not telling you what to do, but if it were me, I'd sign here. And so I had to go with my gut, and I decided to stay and went on to play the best football of my life and was playing psychological games with myself. I literally forced myself to not wear gloves in practice or in preseason games to prove to myself, like, everything it is I've trained myself to be, I'm going to trust, right? And I cannot tell you how empowered you feel when you can prove that to yourself. You know what I mean? And not be scared that a drop could cost me. Because keep in mind, a drop could cost me. I'm in the most scrutinized environment I've ever been in. I mean, in San Francisco at that time, you didn't make mistakes. Right. You know what I mean? Like, you dropped a ball in a practice, the whole place was quiet. Like, you just screwed everything up. And they let you know about it. But I played the best football of my life there and was in this amazing zone and went on to lead our team in preseason. I got preseason player of the game, my first game there. And then right after I got preseason player of the game, I proceeded to start getting cussed out by the head coach and didn't know why it was happening. It just came out of nowhere. At that point in time, I was quiet, articulate, intelligent, hardworking. Since I got there, I'd won every conditioning drill. I was staying after practice in 112-degree weather in Rockland, California. After 2 practices in training camp, catching balls for an extra 20 minutes. I was gregarious, and yet this coach had an issue with me. And at first, you kind of brush it off. He cussed me out in practice the day after or 2 days after I got player of the game and was doing these interviews. And apparently he didn't like the fact that I, did these interviews and was one of the last guys out of the locker room. And he cussed me out about that when I made a mistake in practice. And basically I didn't think much of it, and then it continued. And a week later it's something else, and a week later he's MFing me before a game, like right literally before a game. I'll tell the quick story, but he basically we were playing the Chargers the 3rd preseason game that preseason. After the first one, he had cussed me out. The receiver coach, after it, the practice where he cussed me out, pulled me aside and said, hey, he's just testing you. He likes you. I'm like, listen, I don't respond to that, but it is what it is. Kind of brushed it off, cussed me out again the next week, kind of brushed it off. We're now playing the Chargers in our 3rd preseason game, and I can't wait because they wouldn't play me. Right. They wouldn't even let me try to be a special teams guy, like a return man, which I was a JUCO All-American, California JUCO All-American. I was top 10 in Division II as a return guy, and they wouldn't even let me attempt to do it in San Diego. When I got to San Fran, because they thought I was blazing, they wanted me to do it, right? By the way, here's the irony. I'll spare everybody the gory details. When I eventually made the San Francisco 49er team, I unofficially got voted as the fastest guy on the team. So 6 months earlier, the personnel guy for the Chargers was telling my agent that Chris has everything, we just don't think he's fast enough. 6 months later, I'm being unofficially voted as the fastest guy on the San Francisco 49ers team. Yeah. So that goes to show you the politics that you have to accept. And that was just my path, so it is what it is. That being said, we're going to play the Chargers, and I can't wait. I'm going to light these fools up. Let's go. So we go out for pregame warm-up. We come back in the locker room, and anyone who's been to an NFL game knows that you can buy these game day magazines. Well, we get those magazines on our stools. So I come back in the locker room, one of 65 guys looking at the magazine, and I'm actually looking at it because there's a profile on one of the players that was drafted by the Chargers that year in the 2nd round named Terrence Shaw. there's a profile on him. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to look at his profile because I'm pretty sure by the time I get in the game, he's going to be in the game. I want to see what they say about him. So I'm looking at the magazine along with 65 other guys, and out of nowhere, someone stands about 3 inches from my face. I'm facing the open locker room, my back's to my locker, and someone stands there, and I don't acknowledge them at first because I figured that they're just pausing and to continue walking, but then they stay there for like 5, 6, 7 seconds. And I look up, and it's the head coach. And he's not looking at me as I'm peering up at him. He's just gazing straight ahead. And so I stare at him for about 5, 6, 7 seconds, and he literally doesn't acknowledge me. So now I'm like, well, what's he doing, right? I'm like, what's this guy doing? And he's still not looking at me, so I'm like, I guess he's just pausing or just in deep thought. Who knows? So I get back into my magazine. And about 5 seconds after that, he leans down and goes, look at Jerry Rice. Look at John Taylor. Look at Steve Young. You don't see them reading an FN magazine, do you? Put that thing down and get ready for the God blank. Put that FN thing down and get ready for the God blank game. And I was like, whoa. And keep in mind, I'm a grown man who's fiery. So for me to hear a grown man talk to me like that was hard enough in itself.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing I could do about it. So he's like, he's attacking my manhood. And all you want to do is let him know that he can't attack your manhood or there's a consequence. But you can't do that. So now I'm going, where is this coming from? So I put the magazine down, didn't say a word. We go out for the first kick return of the game, and we're getting the ball first, and I'm returning the ball, and I return it like 50 yards and almost break it. I do a little innocent, innocuous thing between my legs with the ball. It wasn't, pull out a Sharpie. It wasn't do this crazy dance. It was just that simple. And I come to the sideline, and he lights me up. Hey, you make an effing play. You put that effing ball down. I don't want to see that. You might be a God-blank player if you're not that. And I was like, what is going on? So long story short, next 2 weeks, he continues to do it. I eventually make the team, decide I better go talk to him. I talked to him. I asked him, Coach, can I talk to you for a second? He says, what do you want? I said, listen, I don't know if I gave you the wrong impression of who I am. I was just doing what I was told to do when I was doing the interview that apparently he didn't like, and I don't care about any of that. I'm just here to be the best player I can be and help this team win. And he says, if it was an issue, you wouldn't be here, so drop it. That was our conversation. He was really cold, really quick. He proceeded to cuss me out as the season progressed. Week 3 of the season, we're out at practice, and I was about to get a repetition in practice, and he yanked me out and put in Jerry Rice, our top guy and the best guy in the world at that time. And apparently the coach didn't like my demeanor walking behind the huddle, so he cussed me out again. And I'm like, oh my gosh, man, here we go again. So the next rep is my rep. And I go in there and I actually drop a ball, something that happened very infrequently for me. But the moment I dropped the ball, it was interesting. It happened right after he had cussed me out. So the first thought in my head was, dude, this guy doesn't like you. You start dropping balls, he's going to cut you. And in that moment, that launched me headfirst into the abyss. And I literally went from a guy who wasn't wearing gloves, who was catching everything with his hands, to literally I forgot how to catch overnight. I had scarred myself so badly emotionally, so quickly, that all I could be was what I feared that I was going to be. And that is someone who couldn't catch and was going to drop balls. So I basically projected that into my reality.
This is one of the things I think when I opened this episode of the podcast, I mentioned how much respect I have for you and how impactful your vulnerability is, because I think, everybody is not really taught how important our own internal advertising campaign is. We tend to, buy iPhones because iPhones say they're great, and we wear Nikes because Nikes say they're great, and we get all this external influence. But really, the most important influence is from ourselves. And despite all your mental conditioning, it shows how, we can't let our guard down, because all of a sudden, that pen got put into that coach's hand, and all of a sudden, you had a belief about yourself, and you started to live a different reality. And it was painful for you, right? I mean, because here you were on this stage with this team, signed a contract, and now you doubted yourself.
Oh, yeah. And at every stage, my unlocking of the mind was different. When I was
right.
at the Chargers, the unlocking of the mind was the fortitude, was the staying in the zone, right? Was the playing for me, right? So I was unlocking the mind on a real psychological level, and that was great. But now I was confronted with like something that was deeply emotional, right? Like he had affected me emotionally, where I became paranoid and petrified about the worst case scenario. And I talked myself into not being able to achieve what I wanted to achieve, when in reality, physically, I was fully capable of
Same
doing
guy.
it. I'd proven it over and over again.
Absolutely, you
know what I
had.
mean?
Sure.
So there was no book at that point. No one prepares you for what happens when someone breaks you emotionally and makes you fear that the worst case scenario is going to become your reality, and that you're going to lose something that you desperately want to keep. And so it just shook me, and I could not shake it. As strong as I was, I could not shake it. I came to practice, and it isn't like we just come to practice for 2.5 hours and go home. You show up at 7 o'clock in the morning. You start your meetings at 7:30. You're in meetings all day. You get one break and then a lunch break, and then you go out for practice at 2:30. You're done at 5. You leave at 5:45 or 5:30 or whatever. Sometimes 6. So that's the day. And so initially, after that started happening, I found myself just becoming very anxious about practice. Right when practice was about to start, I started feeling anxious about, okay, well, don't screw up. And inevitably, I was screwing up and I was dropping balls. And then eventually that started expanding to where now it's happening, like as I'm sitting there having lunch, I'm thinking about not screwing up. And then it's like, okay, well, now I'm showing up at the facility at 7:30 in the morning, and already all I can think about is, don't screw up. You can't drop a ball. You got to survive practice. And literally it became about surviving something that I used to love doing. And part of the paranoia was that I love San Francisco. If you took him out of the equation, I love San Francisco. I loved my teammates, the guy they drafted in the first round who got unjustly maligned from day one. I loved him. He was my best friend on the team and a great player. I loved the city. I loved everything. I was playing great. I loved everything. And then he was in the environment. And so he changed the structure of the environment. But I came to the complex, and the moment I showed up at the complex, I was like petrified that I was going to get someone tapping me on the shoulder to say, the coach wants to see you. And I was going to be the guy whose dream ended.
That scarcity mindset.
Oh my gosh. So every day,
yeah.
every day I showed up at the facility, that's what I was like coming to. So the anxiety started immediately. And then again, I'm sitting in meetings. I can't even think about anything but, you got to survive one more day. You can't drop too many balls today. Don't drop a ball. I'm catching the ball with my body, and I still can't catch. I won't even use my hands now. I got gloves on by this time. I won't even use my hands. I can't even see the ball clearly. It was like a grenade coming at me, or a torpedo, probably a torpedo. And I couldn't literally let myself just see the ball. So it was exhausting emotionally to have to exist like that for 7-8 hours every single day. And at first I could leave it at the facility. But, 3 weeks in, it was like the second I took my shower after practice and after that exhausting day, and I felt relieved that I feel like I survived practice, I guess, I could get in the car and go home, and I could leave it there. But then by week 3, the second I got in the car, I was already thinking about the next day. I'm like, okay, you can't screw up the next day. You got to survive the next day.
Yeah, I call that negative thought stacking. I mean, there's no anchoring statement. There's no affirmation. I mean, your identity about yourself is now been jarred, and there's nothing to anchor you back to your own reality. Someone's got the pen and they're writing hard. And all you're trying to do is just look away from the page.
It consumed
exhausting.
me.
Yeah.
And it overwhelmed me. And only in the years, after football did I look back and realize I fully had anxiety. Didn't
know what to call it.
Yeah, I didn't know. I just knew something is very disruptive inside of me, and I hate the way it feels. I don't know how to manage this. I cannot escape this. And I was such a victim to it. And I would never wish that feeling on anybody, because it's, you got to keep in mind, it wasn't like I was feeling that just going to sit in an office. I'm feeling that way, trying to hold on to a dream that 0.0012% of the people on the planet get to experience. And on any given day, I could lose that. So I'm going to the most scrutinized environment, trying to be great in that environment against the best guys on the planet at their craft. And yet, I can't. And so you got to imagine the overwhelm, and the amount of emotional distress that I was feeling was off the charts. And again, there was no book for that. So what happened was one night, about just beyond 3 weeks of dealing with that, I just went home, and I just hated where I was. It just kind of, I don't know what it is about the bathroom, man. And, something about the mirror that just lets you just have a moment with yourself. And I just got mad. And I just got pissed and was like, you know what? For lack of a better description, I was like, F this guy. I don't like this guy. He's a prick. I don't respect him. The fact that he could have an issue with Chris Thomas, who were who possesses every attribute you would want, and aside from that was playing phenomenal, it makes me mad. And it gives me even less respect for him because, I deserve the success that I want and I've prepared for. And I've let him change the experience for me, right? So that's an important word. I let him. He really didn't have the power. Like I gave him the power.
Yeah, I tell
You know what
people
I
all the
mean?
time. It's like Iron Man. He's got that thing in his chest that's his power man. I never seen Iron Man go up against one adversary and hand him the thing in his chest that
Yeah.
keeps him alive, man. But we do have a tendency if we're not trained differently, and I think that's, we'll get to Fusion Odyssey and the incredible work you're doing to help athletes of all ages overcome this stuff today, because I don't think there wasn't a book for it, and now, fortunately you've taken all this experience and created that platform. But yeah, I mean, we really do give the power away sometimes, and we don't have to.
And I think the acknowledgement of that is where you get to rewire yourself.
That's right.
And you get to create a new experience, because the moment consciously you acknowledge how irrational your thinking has been, then you can create a different pathway, right? But you first have to become conscious. At that point, I was just experiencing, my victimhood, I guess, for lack of a better word. I was just experiencing like whatever you were telling me I was supposed to experience. And I was a victim to that. And then I was projecting that into the next day over and over again. And it was my reality. So I just got mad. It was like, F this guy. I don't like him. Don't respect him. He's a prick. How he could have an issue with me, I have no idea. But I've let this guy take something away from me, and I'm going to get it back. I'm going to go get my freaking 7 seconds back tomorrow at practice, because I didn't play for this dude before I was here, and I have no reason to be playing for this dude now. So I'm not going to let him change my experience anymore. If he wants to cut me, he can do it, but I'm not going to let him take away what it is that I prepared to be. So the next day at practice, again, it goes back to the consciousness. I consciously said, I'm going to play a different game for 7 seconds. And it was my game. I created a game with me and the sensation with the ball. So I had to. So I could overnight gain confidence in using my hands again. So I was like, okay, play a game with the sensation. The sensation on your fingertips, the way that it feels, the way the nose comes in. You got to play a game that's like smaller than the real game, because the real game intimidates you. So I need the mind to go to a place where, in order to win the game that I'm creating, I don't have room to be intimidated. I don't have the room to be insecure. There's not enough room for that if I'm going to win this. I can only live in one space, and that's a space connected to the action and the end result that I want. So, and then the way my foot was going to hit the ground, and the way that the DB was going to turn and overcommit one direction when I really wanted to go this direction, like that became my game for 7 seconds. And in one moment, I did it. And in doing it, I was like, okay, there's something to that right there. It was a conscious decision. And so once I experienced it once, I could create it again, and then again, and then again, and then again. Because the reality was nothing my environment was going to change. He wasn't going to change. He
coach,
maintained the same attitude.
Same
towards
practice
me.
facility.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
He didn't change a thing. What changed was the game that Chris was playing and who he was playing it for. And I got that back. And so I had to delve deeper into the mental component of the game that people said, that the coach said was 85%. Right now it was the emotional game of judgment, of pressure, of expectations, of fear of failure, of trying to be perfect. I had to dive headfirst into learning how to navigate those waters and then redefine the game. So that's really what I did. Was I redefined the game that I was playing. And in redefining that game, I created this cocoon around me. And in that cocoon, there was no place for judgment. There wasn't enough space for pressure. There wasn't enough space for fear of failure. There wasn't enough space for worrying about some exogenous force that I didn't control. It was like my 7 seconds. And so I learned, and this is why I'm so proud of myself. I learned how to be sensational with that adversary, right? With something that literally was built and put there to not allow me to find success. In spite of that, against the best guys on the planet at their craft in the most scrutinized environment I've ever been in, with that obstacle, I was great over and over and over again. And in spite of him, even when the season was over, the offensive coordinator the next year, I was there for 2 years. They had me under contract. I told my agent I needed to get out, and he's like, I can't do anything. They got you under contract. So I start the next off season after not playing nearly as much as I should have the first year. And I get the offensive coordinator, asked me to come up to see him in the office as I'm, doing an off-season workout. And I go see him, and he and I shoot the breeze for a minute, and he says, listen, Chris, I just want to tell you something. I love you. I think you are a great player. And if we didn't draft this guy in the first round last year, you'd be starting for us right now. I think you are that great. And I was like, wow, coach, thank you so much. He says, but the head coach doesn't like you. And I said, why? He goes, I have no idea. So that was my reality. I only share that to say this. It tells you the space that Chris Thomas chose to live in, that guy could dislike me and try to break me that hard. And in spite of that, Chris wasn't good. I got one of the highest in command telling me that I am great and that I could be great and that I could be a starter in the NFL. So that is what defined me, and that validated everything that I was doing. Ultimately, what happened that next year was they drafted 2 guys in the draft at wide receiver, and I knew I wasn't going to be there because the coach didn't want me there, but he kept me there for another 7 or 8 months. So you have to give everything you have for the false, reality that somehow you're going to make the team. And I knew that there was no way that I could. And so he cut me like the week before the season was about to start. And so I sat out of football a full year. I really think looking back, what happened was it was a blessing because I got really sick that next year. And I honestly, looking back, think that it was because I was harboring all these emotions inside that never had a place to go. I had learned, I think, a little too late to navigate that. But I was playing well, but I wasn't in I was still contending with that emotional force that was trying to break me over and over again. So it took a lot of energy to contend with
the hindrances.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just took so much energy to show up every day.
And that it was all expressed in your body, all the cortisol, all the adrenaline, everything was firing all the time for you, trying to protect you from getting cut or from dropping a pass. And it was like just pumping you full of all of those, chemicals and everything and hormones and
everything.
And when you stopped, it was like too much and you just got sick.
Yeah. It was like, it was weird. I was still training to go be prepared in case workouts came. And there were workouts that actually came and I said no to them. My agent's like, oh, hey, the Eagles want to work you out, the Packers. I'm like, I'm not working out for anybody, man. They can watch the video. They can watch film. I was just done. I was like over it all. I was like, here's yet another obstacle. And this one was the worst, CS, because I was playing the best I could ever play. And it was being acknowledged by everybody around me. Everybody around me acknowledged, like, this kid is great. Steve Young, a Hall of Famer, was like, this kid's a dude. Like, everybody was acknowledging that. And yet here I was again, not getting what I wanted. I mean, I was so done with it all. I was just over it. So I'll be honest, when I got cut, on one hand, it was kind of a relief. I was like, get me the hell out of here. I'm sick of battling this.
This battle can end.
You know what I mean? I'm sick of having to invest this much energy in it just every single day of my life, because you don't get a break from it. And so it was kind of a relief, and that's why when my agent immediately was like, hey, other teams want to work you out, I was like, I'm not working out for anybody, man. They want to know what I can do. Like, I shouldn't be working out for anybody. I should be on a freaking NFL roster right now. So if they want to know what I can do, go watch some video. Go ask the Niners for some video. But after I got kind of over that, I started working out again. And then what happened was I was working out, came home, and my ankle was hurting. I'm like, oh, gosh, did I do something to my ankle when I was catching balls? And, I don't think so. Next day I go out, and my foot's hurting. I'm like, well, did I do something to my foot? What's going on? 2 days later, my lower back is hurting. And then, 4 days after that, like, my knees are hurting. I'm like, what is going on? And meanwhile, I'm still working out. Within 2 weeks, I went from being this really, really strong guy who literally, was named the pound for pound guy pretty much on every team I was on, to a guy who, if you were looking at a bench and the bench has the bar on it, I literally couldn't lift the bar off the bench. It was I was like, what is going on? And overnight, in a matter of 2 weeks, I felt like I was like 102 years old. My body was like broken. Every joint in my body hurt. I could hardly get out of bed. Like, literally, I got out of bed like I was 102 years old at age 24. And I did not know what was going on. I thought that it was going to subside, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And eventually, like, it just overcame me. And I just didn't know what to do. I didn't have insurance anymore through the NFL, so I just was hoping like it'd go away, and it just wouldn't go away for 2 months. And finally, the quarterback that I told you I'd met when I was in college, who became an amazing friend and mentor to me, he said, hey, listen, you should go check out this acupuncturist. I know it's like, forward thinking, and I know it's unconventional, but I've gone to him. I'm just telling you, I think it could help you. So I had no alternative. So I'm like, hey, right now this isn't working. So I went to go see him because I went to go get blood tests finally. Got everything checked, and they're like, you got a virus. That's what you got, and it's got to run its course. I'm like, okay, here's the problem. What I neglected to say was I signed with the Washington Redskins in the offseason while they were still playing. They signed me. They didn't want me to come work out. They just were willing to sign me. So I signed with them, and now I'm at a point where I'm like a month away or a month and a half away, maybe a month, from actually showing up for their offseason program, and I can't hardly walk and get out of bed. And now I'm freaking out. I'm
Right.
like, oh, I can't go there like this.
Come on,
Like,
man,
I
this
don't know
is-
what
yeah.
to do. So I was at my wit's end. So I went to this acupuncturist. He was amazing. I tried to tell him what was wrong. He didn't want to hear it. He's just like, I fix you. And I'm like, no, but this is wrong. He's like, Korean man, just the nicest man. He's like, no, I fix you. And I was like, no, you don't understand. My ankles, I fix you. I'm like, come on. You don't understand my elbows? I fix you. And it's such a hard thing to believe when, like, you've obviously been broken for that long. 3 days later, he had me playing in a soccer game. It was crazy. It was the craziest thing I ever experienced. I went to Washington, and
He fixed you.
he fixed me. Yes, he
Let's
fixed
go.
me. I loved that man. I
Yeah.
loved him. It was unbelievable how that happened in my life. I went to Washington and basically picked up my broken pieces. Went there with the idea that I was going to have a chance to compete for a job. They ended up drafting a guy. They said they wouldn't draft. Ended up signing a big name free agent. They said they wouldn't sign, and I'm right back to square one. They ended up cutting me after playing really well, and ended up signing me back after 2 weeks because their special teams was terrible, and they needed a guy like Chris Thomas who had proven in training camp that he was a great special teams player. And the special teams coach loved me, and I proceeded to go back there. In my first game back there, I got special teams player of the game, and then proceeded to do really well, and then got put in some horrible situations where the head coach did not really want me there. It was right back to San Francisco again, and he basically just tolerated me because I was great in special teams, and the special teams coach said that he needed me. So what he did was he had me on the roster for that purpose, but he literally in practice never gave me one single repetition of our own offense in 10 weeks of football. Not one. So I was only ever doing like what we call scout team stuff, which was I was always playing the other team's, number one wide receiver for the week. The only great thing about that was that meant that I got to go against our number one DB, who was Darryl Green.
That's
He's
right.
in the Hall of
Remember
Fame.
that.
He's
Yeah,
one
he
of the
is.
top 10 DBs to ever play the game. So every day in practice, I got to go against that guy. So that obviously made me really good. And I got to measure myself against the best. But he literally, our coach, my head coach, did not give me a rep of our own offense for 10 weeks because he didn't want me there. He gave all the reps to two guys that literally never dressed down on Sundays and weren't going to dress down on Sundays. So it made no sense. We had 5 wide receivers dressed down on Sundays. I was one of them, but you're giving all the backup reps to 2 guys who were never going to play on Sunday. And they were great guys. They're my friends. I loved them. It was nothing about that. It's just
Right.
how insensible it was. It tells you what he felt about me. You know what I mean? So he didn't prepare me for a game. And here we are in week 11. And you already know this. We're in week 11 playing the Cowboys, which is a big rivalry, division rival, a lot at stake in Texas Stadium, right? And in the first half, we get 2 wide receivers hurt. And they're done for the year. Well, keep in mind, I told you we only dressed out 5 guys. 2 guys are hurt. We're down to 3.
And you've taken how many reps?
0 of
That's
our own
right.
offense. 0 reps. I get the same playbook as everybody else. And when I do, I study as though I'm starting every Sunday, right? That's just who Chris Thomas is. And so I see these 2 guys get hurt, and I'm going, oh my gosh, I might play. And keep in mind, this is going to be my first game time experience as a wide receiver since I was playing for the Niners. I sat out of football a full year. We're now in week 11, so you're talking at like 18 months since I played in a real game
It's a long
as
time
a wide receiver.
as an NFL.
Okay?
Yeah, at any competitive level, for sure.
Yeah, so I'm going into halftime going, oh my gosh, I think I might play. This is crazy. So immediately I go into halftime and I get into my playbook because, every team runs 3 wide receiver sets, right? So if we run a 3 wide receiver set, Chris has to be the 3rd wide receiver. So I'm in my playbook. My receiver coach loved me. He comes and walks by me and says, CT, Shep is done and Harp is done. Those are the 2 guys who got hurt. He said, are you good? And I said, yeah, T, I'm good. And he walked away. So that tells you the difference in opinion.
Right.
Right? He knows who I am. He knows I can play. He knows I'm prepared. I continue in my playbook, and I see my receiver coach, Terry, around the corner. And all of a sudden I hear the head coach call him, hey, Terry. And so now I'm hearing their conversation. And then the head coach walks up to him. I can see the head coach, but he can't really see me. But I can hear everything. He says, hey, Shep is done and Harp is done. Who else do we have to run a 3 wide receiver set? And he says, Chris Thomas. And the head coach goes, mother effer. So I want you to imagine psychologically how you would feel if you hadn't played a game for 18 months as a wide receiver. you are now going to be thrust into a situation where you have not been prepared to succeed by getting any repetitions in the offense that you're going to have to run should you play in the second half. And the vote of confidence you get from the head coach is, mother effer, I got to play this guy. Okay, so I was at a point psychologically where I was stronger than the words.
You were.
You know what I mean?
You've done
so
the
like
reps. Absolutely.
I had already learned to live in this cocoon by then. I already knew he didn't want me there. I already knew he didn't like me. I already knew that, if I messed up, he was going to cut me. But San Francisco and me unlocking every compartment of the mind allowed me to, for 7 seconds, as many times as you needed me to live in a space that was mine and shut you off, shut out every external force and all the noise. So I learned to like hyper focus and become connected to an action that was far deeper than your opinion of me. So I became very good at that. So he couldn't affect me the same way. That being said, make no mistake about it, I was nervous about playing.
Sure.
So we go out for the second half. It's now the third quarter, I believe. We don't call the three wide receiver set for a while, but then all of a sudden it's like 2nd and 10. My receiver coach goes, CT, if we don't get another yard, here's what we're gonna run. What do you do? And I'm like, okay, I'm in the slot. I'm gonna clear out for our 14-year veteran who's starting named Henry Eller to catch the ball. Okay, that's what you would expect. And he goes, you're right, but here's what I want. I want you to tell Henry. We called him Hop. I want you to tell Henry to go in the slot. I want you catching the ball. So you got to imagine, like, one, I'm like taken aback by that suggestion. You know what I mean? Because clearly you would want a 14-year vet, not a guy who's been cut from 2 NFL teams or one already, and he's been hanging on by a thread and hasn't played offense for 18 months. That's not the guy you want playing in a critical division game against your rival Dallas Cowboys, right? Where it was a close game. So I was like, you want me to tell that to Hop? And he goes, yeah. And to be honest with you, I did not want that responsibility because I knew that if I messed up, the head coach, despite the fact that my receiver coach loved me and he watched me do great things in practice over and over again, the head coach would rationalize that Chris couldn't play if I made a mistake. Be like, see, I told you he couldn't play.
Every play was like the epicenter of your career. Every play
was a joke.
Every play was on the line.
It was a joke.
Yeah.
It was a real joke, but the energy invested in living in my space was immeasurable. You know what I mean? So I really didn't want that responsibility, but I had no choice. So I go out there and I tell Hop that he's got to go inside and I go out wide and it's a critical third down and there's no warm up. There's no like, hey guy, give me some space. I've not played for 18 months. It's a guy right in your face who's pressing you and stopping you from getting up the field. And so I have to do what I do. And fortunately I do what I do and I end up getting the ball thrown and I catch it for a big first down. On that same drive, we find ourselves in another 3rd and long, and they had a guy in their team, the Cowboys, named Deion Sanders, and Deion was known as like the best in the game or one of them. And he was a guy who like made a living at intercepting balls. He was fast as heck, quick as heck, and he loved to bait you into throwing to his side. So literally the game plan, because Deion was so good, was to never throw the ball to his side. That's not a hyperbole. That's not exaggeration.
That was the game plan.
That's literally the game plan. Don't ever throw to his side. Our quarterbacks knew it. Our receivers knew it. So we call a play on a critical third down on the same drive where our number 1 wide receiver is lined up on Deion's side. He knows he's not going to get the ball. So in the middle of the play, he starts yelling at me to switch sides with him. We've never rehearsed that. So here I am, like in the last second when the play clock's running down, I'm trying to sprint to the other side. He's sprinting to my side. We're trying to switch sides, and we got to call a timeout. I come to the sideline, and what does the head coach do? He cusses me out. Knowing doggone well it wasn't my fault, but I was the target, right?
Sure.
I was the easy target.
Sure.
So he cusses me out. My receiver coach goes, why are you yelling at him? That wasn't him. It was the other guy. And so then he stopped and called the same play. So what does number 1 receiver do? Does the same exact thing. Fortunately, we have enough time on the play clock, so I'm now on Deion's side. He's on the opposite side thinking he's going to get the ball. Long story short, I get matched up with Deion, and I do my thing, and Deion can't even really stop with me. And then the quarterback throws it my way when he's not supposed to. I come up with this huge catch and a big first down, and Deion's all upset and very demonstrative about the fact that he let me catch the ball. We would go on to score a touchdown. We would go on to lose on a last-second field goal by a point or two. That being said, like, those moments were monumental on so many levels because they were so indicative. I mean, I don't know that you could find yourself in a higher pressure situation than those.
Yeah. Not 1 second. I don't think that's where the rubber met the road, right?
Yes, there. And so for me to demonstrate, and I will be very honest with you and tell you this, that although I made those plays, I was very unsettled inside. I made those plays because I could. I made those plays because I learned to live in this good emotional space. But on some level, the noise was still real, and I knew what was at stake. And you can't fully ignore that because it's real. So you have to really embrace its reality and then create your own reality out of it. But it was unsettling. Chris could go out and play really well, but Chris never was at total peace about playing well. I didn't enjoy the game the same way. The game had really kind of changed because it wasn't just a game; it was survival.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And it's what people end up calling on. Literally, looking back, before I really learned how to manage the emotions, I was calling on the survival instinct. I was calling on the instinct to get away from the axe murderer, to get away from the car that's run off the road that's coming at you and you got to dive out of the way, to not get hit by the train, to whatever. I'm calling on that instinct, and that instinct is heavy. That stress release is big, you know what I mean? And it just permeates and overwhelms your body. So although I could live in this space, that's also what was being conjured. I could live in this great mental space, but physically, that was also being conjured. So there was a lot of emotion that was involved in just trying to be successful in those moments. And it didn't feel great. I just could do it. But that being said, that coach I never won him over. I would go on to play the rest of that season, end up with 16 catches in the last 4 games or so, or 5 games. The next year I rotated time with another guy. And I watched this guy that he really loved drop 3 balls in 1 series, not a quarter, not a half, 1 series. And I love this guy. He was a great guy, great player, ended up starting in the NFL for a number of years, but it was his guy. And he dropped 3 balls in 1 series, playing against the Seahawks because they were punishing our number 1 wide receiver. The coach yanked him out and put our number one wide receiver back in. And the next day at practice, after he dropped those 3 balls, I was walking with my buddy. The head coach called him over, and I heard the conversation. He said, "Hey, don't worry about that. You're going to be fine. It happens to everybody. You're going to be a good player." I dropped 2 balls in arguably 16 games, and by the time I dropped my second, which was the second season, it happened in back-to-back games or twice in 3 games. The coach benched me for 7 weeks. So that was the difference.
Right.
That was the response that I got.
I know.
So he was never an advocate. Going into my 3rd year there, I almost quit football because I'd had it. Basically, I went out, we were in off-season training. I went out to go catch balls one day with the quarterbacks, and my receiver coach came up and said, "CT, I just had a talk with the head coach." "Oh, yeah? About what?" "Well, he asked me who I'd start if we were starting tomorrow," and I said I'd start you and whoever else, right? So clearly by then I had demonstrated to everyone around me that I could play, including my receiver coach. And I said, "Well, what was our head coach's response?" He said, "I'd never start Chris." That was it for me. I'd had it. So I reached another point where I hit my wall. So I went home, and again, I told you I believe in God, and God's my base, and went home and I kind of faux prayed. I didn't really pray for an answer. I just prayed to say I prayed. I made up my mind I wasn't going to play potentially anymore. Went to my receiver coach's office and told him, "Hey, I'm thinking about walking away. If I walk away, how's that going to impact you?" And he said, "You know what? You do what you got to do. You know how I feel about you. I'd rather you not, but you got to do what's best for you." So I made my decision that if the coach messed with me at all in the next mini camp we were about to have, which was 2 days away, that I was done. And really, I was anticipating being done.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I really was. So
things had stacked up that way.
Yeah. So I'm in the weight room by myself the day before our mini camp's about to start because we all have to go out and do all this testing stuff. And in walks that DB, that Hall of Fame DB, Darryl Green, sits down and we start talking. And he and I had never been alone like that. So we start talking, and he asked me how the off season's going, and I tell him, and he never trained there. He always did his own thing. And we sit down, and he says, "How's it going here?" I said, "You know what? It's same old, another year, same old nonsense." He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "It's another year of the head coach trying to mess with me, D. Green, and it's played out. I'm over it." And he was a very strong Christian man, someone I really wanted to mimic.
Right.
And then he says this, and keep in mind, you don't have dialogue with DBs as wide receivers. You're not telling each other you think each other's great or I like you or whatever. You just compete, and you have a sense on who respects you and who doesn't. But the dialogue went like this. I said what I said to Daryl, and then he looked at me and said, CT, I believe if they would leave you alone and let you play, you're a Pro Bowl wide receiver. And it just completely shocked me, because although I will tell you quite honestly, I always felt that that's how I played, I never got that validation. And Daryl would know better than anyone because I went against him every single day in practice.
Right.
And it just shocked me. And it was a sign to me from God that my journey wasn't over, that I wasn't supposed to walk away. I was trying to make the decision for myself. But to me, it was a sign from God saying, you don't get to make that decision. Like, I'm the one that makes it. And I'm telling you, there's a reason why you're on this course. You're supposed to stay here. And because I am a man of faith, I could read that sign properly. So against everything in my body, because I was so ready to be done. Football never defined me. It was what I was great at doing and I loved.
Right.
But I was ready to do something else. And I wanted to walk away. And to be honest with you, part of me was like almost bitter that I had to stay the course because I wanted to leave. And I stayed. And I would eventually make the team and then pull my hamstring in the second game of the year on the first kickoff. And that was his chance to finally cut me, and he did. I had just gotten married, just bought my first house. Now I'm out of a job. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, really? I didn't really want to be in that environment, but I needed that environment. You know what I mean?
Sure, of course.
So I didn't know what was going to happen. And 2 or 3 days after I got cut, the phone rings, and it's an old coach from the Redskins who went to the St. Louis Rams as the offensive coordinator, who heard I got cut because it's on the wire very quickly, and said, we're going to get a guy suspended for 4 weeks. We're going to need to sign a guy for 4 weeks, and I want it to be you. It's a temporary gig, but I believe that, you can maybe make more out of it. I can't tell you that for sure, but I want you to come here and work out when you're healthy. Let me know. I got healthy a couple weeks later, told them I was ready. They weren't ready for me. The Seahawks were. I go to the Seahawks, work out. They tell me to pack like I'm staying. I pack like I'm staying, and then I have a workout. All they want to see is that I'm healthy. I show them I'm healthy, but they say, we're going to wait 1 more week. So I'm like, really? Hop back on a plane with all my stuff. Sure enough, the next week, the Rams called. I go there to work out. I'm working out with another guy who was a former first-round draft pick a couple years earlier, and I thought it was just kind of my gig. But now I'm like in a van showing up with somebody else who's flying in from another place, and we're both working out together. We go work out. At that point, I'd learned to make the workouts about me, not about I have to do this or I have to make the team or I can't leave here without a contract or whatever else goes through guys'
Scarcity
heads,
was gone.
right?
Yeah.
So because of that, I did exactly what I should have done and showed really well. We both were supposed to jump on a plane and fly back home. The scout comes and retrieves him. 45 minutes later, he comes back in and sits down with me and says, Chris, I just wanted you to know, like, the coaches actually want you to stay. They liked you a lot. We're going to sign you. We're just not going to sign you till next week when the suspension begins, but they want you to stay or wonder if you wouldn't mind staying overnight so you can start getting acclimated to the offense, right? So it was a total shocker to me. I'm not prepared for that, but of course the answer is yes.
Yes.
So I said yes, and he said, I just thought you'd like to know. Every single scout who was out there watching you and every coach who was out there watching you and the other guy all said the same thing, that if they didn't know who the former first-round draft pick was and the former free agent was, they would have all bet that you were the former first-rounder. And I said, wow, that feels amazing. Thank you so much. I would go on to get signed the week later, or the next week, and basically it was supposed to be a temporary gig. I gave him all I had. The head coach was a guy named Dick Vermeil, who was revered and loved as a player's coach. And when my 4 weeks were up, it was 2 days before the last game that I was supposed to play, and I went up to the coach and as we were out at practice and just thanked him for the opportunity and said how much it meant to me. Because honestly, Charlie, that was the first time I had experienced the NFL as I envisioned it as an 8-year-old boy.
Isn't that amazing? Here you are, Eric Dickerson's your boyhood idol, and you're ending up playing for a great players coach, finally enjoying the game for the Rams.
Yeah, and it was what I always thought it was going to be, but it wasn't. Right? So it was like I was so grateful that I got a chance to see the NFL as the fantasy that it was as an 8-year-old become a reality.
Yeah.
Like it really happened. And I was okay. I was okay walking away. On some level, I was exhausted with it all, but I was okay with walking away. And I just was thanking him for the opportunity to have that experience. And I just said, I can't tell you how much it meant for me to be here. And he said, you're welcome. And you showed me a lot. Because you have, I'm actually going to cut somebody I really like in order to keep you here. And that's what he did. He cut a guy who the next year went to the Eagles and made the Pro Bowl, a tight end. And Chris Thomas got a chance to experience one of the greatest seasons ever in the NFL, and we went to the Super Bowl, and I became a Super Bowl champ when I wasn't supposed to. And then, ended up signing there again the next year, ended up leaving, going to Minnesota, got cut from Minnesota. They never gave me a chance. The next day I'm signed with the Rams. My first ball thrown to me is a 54-yard touchdown in my second year there in preseason, their last preseason game, and I make the team. I'm there for another year. At that point, I'm ready to be done. And then Dick Vermeil, who was the coach that was heading the team and won the Super Bowl, had retired, but he only retired for a year. Came out of retirement, became the Kansas City Chiefs' new head coach, took our wide receiver coach from the Rams, brought him in as an offensive coordinator, and I get a phone call that's asking me to come there and play. And at that point, I really knew I was done. Like emotionally, I was just tapped out. Psychologically, I was tapped out. The game wasn't the same for me. I was still really, really good at it, and no one would have known how I felt inside because I was performing like a superstar. But I had no stats to prove it. I only had like what I was doing to prove it, and the way I felt and the way that I was getting feedback. But I also knew that if I ever was going to end my career on a great note, it'd be with these men. So I decided to do it, gave it what I had, ended up starting for the first time in my NFL career, at the twilight of my career, and scored my one and only regular season touchdown. I scored multiple touchdowns in preseason, but scored my one and only regular season touchdown against the Redskins in Washington against Darryl Green, guarding me. So it was really special, and after that year I was done. And, I say all that, and I don't share the stories on how people viewed my talent so that I could convince somebody like Chris was great. I couldn't care less what anyone thinks about that. Like at the end of the day, I know what greatness looks like, and I was it for a very long period of time.
Right.
And did it consistently against the best guys on the planet. Was recognized for being that guy from some of the best coaches in the NFL and a Hall of Fame DB and multiple guys aside from that. Okay? Even when I went to the Rams, we had two Hall of Famers. We had one Hall of Famer, like literally Isaac Bruce, one of the best receivers ever. He was one of the guys that was the wideout there, and Torrey Holt, who should be inducted into the Hall of Fame. Isaac Bruce got inducted this year. But with Isaac Bruce, who's a Hall of Famer, Torrey Holt is going to be a Hall of Famer. We were called the greatest show on turf that year. Oz Hakeem was the best slot man in the game. Ricky Proehl there was no better fourth wide receiver in the NFL. We had those guys, and I was just a guy who didn't really play at all. When I went back for our 15-year reunion to celebrate our Super Bowl achievements, I had a chance to go back and take my son because he had never had a chance to see me play. He was like 1 year old at the time, or 1 year old at the time. And so he had a chance to be around all these guys, and I was sitting there with all those receivers, and I was sitting there with one of our DBs who at that, when we won the Super Bowl was a rookie. He was a second-round draft pick out of Carolina. He ended up playing for 10 years, made a couple Pro Bowls. He was really, really good. He turned around and looks at me and says, "Hey, Babyface," that was my nickname. He says, "Babyface." And I said, "What's up, Dre?" He said, "I just wanted you to know something, man. You were cold. You were a cold player." And I started kind of laughing. It's like, okay, because he's a funny dude. I'm like, okay. He's like, "No, I'm being for real." He said, "I don't think you really understand how much we used to talk about you in the defensive meeting rooms." I was like, "Oh, okay, all right." I said, "All right, Dre, cool, man." He goes, "No, I'm being for real." And he looks at Torrey Holt, and he looks at Torrey and says, "T. Holt, who did I tell you that out of all y'all, you, Ike B, and Oz, and everybody, who did I tell you that I hated going against the most?" And he said, "Babyface." And Dre looked at me and said, "CT, I'm being for real, man. You were cold." And so, it was great. My son heard that from him out of his mouth. But long story short, I'm not saying that, again, to convince anyone about my greatness. I was great.
That's right.
That was validated. I have no statistics to prove that. And because I am who I am, and because I understand how to manage the outside world and what the world tells me I'm supposed to feel about the fact that I didn't have 45 touchdowns and 1,000 catches, I can appreciate my stardom. I can appreciate my achievements. I can appreciate that I was extraordinary. And it has fed me forward in my life. I wasn't a victim to the fact that I was that guy and didn't get what I wanted. I could have easily been a victim to, you know what? I was that guy, and I didn't get anything that guy deserves. I didn't get I didn't get 3 contracts that were multi-million dollars. I didn't get to start as long as I should have. I didn't get the 50 touchdowns. I didn't get the celebration. I didn't get people knowing my name across the nation or the world. I'm cheated. I don't feel cheated
No.
because I wouldn't let myself feel cheated. I wouldn't let myself be a victim to that because my mentality is different. I'm going to create the victory myself, right? Like if you won't create it for me, then I will create the victory because the victory is real. I mean, I can't deny the victory. Once I become conscious of how illogical it was that I didn't get what I wanted, then I can appreciate exactly what I was.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
And that right there is why I've told people all the time, like, I'm a Hall of Famer. There are guys in the Hall of Fame that if they had to take my path, I don't know if they could have lasted 8 years. You know what I mean?
That brings up, as we kind of get to the end and talk about what you're doing now. I mean, I think the power of resilience, is what you embody more than anything. I mean, all those setbacks, this podcast is about overcoming, and whether it's injuries or being cut or coaches that were, slighted against you, that you stayed the course, you found a way to believe in yourself. And now I think, that path has led you to create Fusion Odyssey, which I believe personally, having been through the video content and to see you working with athletes of all ages and turning them into and helping them overcome unpacking that same mental baggage that they might be living with, and to help those young athletes, enjoy the sport, not have to wait till the end to finally enjoy it, but to enjoy it is a gift, that you're giving so much. And so tell us, about Fusion Odyssey. Tell us about how people can find you. I'm happy through my platforms, obviously, to direct people to Chris Thomas. But tell us about Fusion Odyssey, what you're doing now, and how people can find you, brother.
Yeah, I was with Merrill Lynch as a financial advisor for 14 years. And as I joined Merrill Lynch, I just coincidentally was asked by a coworker who was coaching high school football if I would go to a JV football practice and work with their wide receivers for a day. And of course, the answer was, yeah, I'll do that. I love that. At that point, I told him, I'm going to show up one day, but when I show up, please don't introduce me as like Chris is here to help. I'm showing up to observe. I don't really know where they are in their development, so I want to make sure that when I give them a day, that they get every ounce from me that they can to become a player that they've never been, right? And so that's a hard thing to achieve in a day. So then I was left to really diagnose, well, how am I going to do that? Yeah. And I was left to really look back at my own experience and how I found greatness. And that was, again, this like amazing revelation of, oh my gosh, wait a minute. I think that I unlocked that 85% that coach talked about day one in the NFL. This starting to make sense now. And I started like really theorizing it in my own way and really categorizing where I found greatness above and beyond just my physical gifts, and recognizing how few players over the course of my 8 years playing, 9 attempts of playing, guys around me were not doing that. They all were playing a physical game, which made them all 50-50 guys. There's a chance you might or might not get what you want. But I realized, wait a minute, I was playing this intellectual game. And now that I look back and understand this intellectual game, I can see that ever since I was a kid, I had this innate understanding of the IQ of the game. Like that it was chess that I was playing out there on the sports field, right? Whether it was soccer, whether it was football or whatever, it was there was this IQ that I naturally had for understanding the chess match of the game. So it made me an intellect before I was ever an athlete. And I realized, oh my gosh, so that became Chris on steroids in the NFL, because I became very hyper aware of that IQ game in the NFL. So why could I beat a guy like Darryl Green way more than other people? Because I didn't line up against Darryl Green as an athlete. I lined up against Darryl Green as an intellect. And then I lined up against Darryl Green as a psychologist, right? So I wasn't wondering if I could beat Darryl Green. I wasn't scared about Darryl Green. I wasn't fearful of a consequence, right? I wasn't judging if I didn't beat him. I wasn't trying to be perfect. Like I was just in this moment where I wanted to own that moment for 7 seconds. And so there was this whole psychological strength that I was performing with, right? And then, of course, the emotional game is the stuff that I just described. The judgment, the pressure, the fear of failure, all that stuff. That did not exist for 7 seconds. So I'm like, wait a minute. I was playing this different intellectual game, this different psychological game, this different emotional game. That's the mental game, and that's really 66% of the game. The psychological and emotional fall into one category,
right?
The intellectual in another, and then, of course, the physical and technical is the other category. And so anyone can play the physical and technical, but most don't play the mental, and that stands true even for the NFL. Trust me. And And so I'm like, so that is why I could be the guy that I was for as long as I was against the best guys on the planet, in spite of these forces really working against me my whole career. So I thought, what happens if I, theorize that and I give that to other people? Well, I went there, and in one day, after I was done working with the guys, the coaches were like, okay, what did you just do? Like, these guys aren't supposed to do what you had them doing in one day. I'm like, I'm not really sure. I've not done this before, so let's find out. So I stuck around. Kids went on to do amazing things. 3 kids that couldn't start at all on the freshman team as wide receivers because they weren't good ended up becoming monsters for me. And aside from that, every kid developed. And at the end of the season, basically, parents were asking me if I would stick around and coach at the varsity level. I said no. I was investing way too much time breaking down film till 1 a.m, and I really needed to prepare to go be successful at Merrill Lynch. And so they said, can we work with you privately? We'll pay you whatever. That's how Fusion Odyssey began. I watched kids in my first year. I had 5 wide receivers, and I watched those wide receivers do phenomenal things. And by the way, one of the things I neglected to say was, I think one of my greatest revelations was recognizing that success is all relative. We become so myopic about how success has to come in one form, and that is the benchmark. And somehow all of us are supposed to achieve the benchmark. And every kid, whether they're talented or not, if they have aspirations for the same benchmark as the most talented guys or girls on the planet. And yet they might not be equipped at all to ever achieve that benchmark, to no fault of their own, right? That benchmark requires a certain degree of talent. And if you're incapable of that talent, then no matter how hard you work, how bad you want it, you might not reach the benchmark. But the world has told you, and you've subscribed to the idea that the only way you can be successful is if you achieve the benchmark. And so if you don't achieve it, the only place you can fall is in the other dimension, which is the realm of failure. And that's where people get lost, because then they feel unworthy. They feel like they have no sense of self. They've lost all their confidence, and they have no desire to keep fighting for something that's going to make them feel that way and thrust them in their eyes deeper into the abyss, right? So then they're going to start at that point, if they're not mentally strong, projecting those fears and projecting the past, lack of accomplishments into the future. And so there's always going to be this wall, right? They're never going to be able to get what they want because, truth be told, they can't leave the past behind. They're telling you that all I am is what you told me I am, and that's a failure. And so they can't see any successes in the pursuit. And that's the most, that's the greatest disservice that we do to ourselves, is not allowing us to see the successes in the pursuit.
The process.
Not allowing ourselves to see how much we are becoming. And so I would tell you that perhaps one of my greatest gifts to athletes has been allowing them to, eliminate that fallacy that you have to achieve this benchmark. No. I want you to set a goal and take the journey. And in that journey, you're going to end up exactly where you're supposed to end up, given the foundation that you've had, leaving no stone unturned. And once you've done that, then you have achieved your greatness. And no one can take that from you. That greatness is every bit as relevant as someone who's putting on a Hall of Fame jacket, or winning the Masters and putting on the green jacket, or becoming an All-American or whatever. And once you allow people to step away from the fallacy that they have to reach that benchmark, then they're willing to celebrate who they are and their achievements, instead of just looking at the end point, as a whole. Like, all my focus is on that, so that's all I care about. It's like, well, that's all you care about, then you might be disappointed in life. And if you're disappointed, you might become disillusioned. If you're disillusioned, you might become defeated. If you become defeated, you can end up in a really bad place.
Yeah.
So, one of my greatest gifts is teaching people that, because I am the epitome of success being all relative. I don't have a Hall of Fame jacket, and I never will. I don't have the stats, and I never will. I was every bit as successful as anybody who's wearing one right now, given my path. And there's nothing you can do to take that away from me. So I give that to young people. I teach them how to get out of their own way. I teach them how to leave the past behind. I teach them how to become connected to an action from the mind. Because really, you can't find success from the body alone, not consistent success. You'll find success if you're gifted, but at some point, that success won't be enough to avoid the abyss. Just look at, Michael Phelps, who's talking about how broken he was and how he was suicidal and depressed and had anxiety really bad. He's the greatest swimmer that's ever, graced the planet. And yet he was swimming under that duress. Kevin Love in the NBA talking about having an anxiety attack in the middle of warming up, in a game and not knowing what was going on. DeMar DeRozan and Hayden Hurst, who got the yips in baseball after being, a first or whatever round he was, a high round draft pick in Major League Baseball, took that path out of high school and then got the yips and literally destroyed him, ate him up until he looked for an escape. And the escape was an unhealthy one, found addiction and lost himself in it. And, was good enough and talented enough that, he could leave baseball, but he didn't defeat, what defeated him. He left, but he was gifted enough to do something else. He did football at South Carolina and then, found the NFL as a first rounder from there, but had to learn how to overcome the emotions that were wrecking him and changing his experience. And so it's because he couldn't leave the past behind.
Right.
So, we have to become conscious. And that's what I help young people do is I'm helping them become conscious about creating the reality that they want, about being present and not projecting what they were into their future. Because if they continue doing that, then you'll never have a future. You'll never explore a place that you've never been. You're going to just bring your history and your past into the future and into the present. And so I lived that. I don't preach that because I read it in a book.
You're
lived
the embodiment of it,
at
for
the
sure.
highest level of sports for a long, long time. It would have been easier to have dealt with that for 2 weeks and got cut. It would have helped me emotionally, you know what I mean? At that time. But it was my path. I was given that for a reason because I'm the right guy to give that to other people. Aside from just being a person who loves to create data banks, you know what I mean? And doesn't just go through an experience. He is extracting something from the experience. I'm the right guy because one, I do that, but two, I am empathetic to everybody else and what they go through. I am spiritual. I want you to experience the spirituality of sports because it's going to permeate your life. Sports is just a mechanism. It's just a tool. It's going to end for all of us at some point in time at the competitive level. And we can continue playing recreationally, and there's some fun in that. But in terms of using it as a tool for young people to really define, what life that they're going to experience, there is no better time than now. And it just happens to be, the athlete right now for me. It could be someone who plays the piano. It could be someone who's an actor and actress. I don't care what you're talking about. Whatever you're doing is a tool and it's a mechanism. And if used properly, you're going to discover a version of you that's going to change the life that you experience. And I've been great at helping people do that. I help people explore the unknown and they become things that they believe they have no business being. It is the most amazing revelation that you can give somebody in life. So that's what I've wanted to do. I've wanted to share my experiences and my knowledge because I am them. I am you. I am you. I've been that person. The difference is I've not been a person who's willing to be a victim. So I took the success that I wanted and I ran with it. And yeah, when people come to me, it doesn't matter. It's funny because everyone sees me out there working with athletes. They're like, okay, what do you do exactly? You're with basketball players and baseball players. I see you doing soccer. I see you doing football. Is there anything you don't do? And the answer is no. I don't care what sport you play. I really don't even care what you're doing right now. You could be playing the piano or playing the guitar. I don't care what you're doing. What I want to know is what's impairing you. What I want you to aspire for is your greatness. And I want you to as long as you're conscious about wanting that greatness, then if you have something that's inhibiting you, then you'll be unwilling to accept that, subconscious anymore, that unconsciousness anymore, because you're going to realize how irrational that is and how it's preventing you from being what you want or getting what you want. But you have to become conscious. You have to become aware. If you don't have awareness, then you'll keep bringing your past into your future, and that will guarantee that you will never be present. And you have to be present. You have to be disconnected from the noise, right? If I'm disconnected from the noise, and at that point, I can create whatever I want to create. But consciousness is key, because once I'm conscious, then I can become very rational about the experiences that I want and rational about how I can create them. And then I can redefine emotions that have impaired me, like judgment. Judgment becomes observation. Pressure becomes opportunity. You know what I mean? Success becomes all relative, and I no longer feel like if I'm not this, then I'm nothing. So you completely redefine the emotional experience that you have. And I've watched for 16 years people achieve the extraordinary that I've never, ever experienced the extraordinary and never believed that the extraordinary was waiting for them. And that right there is what Fusion Odyssey is. It's a spiritual journey, because you can't get away from the fact that once you go into that space, that it's spiritual, because there's so much emotion involved in the experience.
For sure.
So that's why when I say it's spiritual, that's what I mean. Like, there is so much emotion involved that you can't possibly not have a spiritual experience. And once it's spiritual, it's deep and it becomes embedded. And once it becomes embedded, then it becomes you. You know what I mean? And then that becomes the experience that you seek everywhere, not just one place, everywhere. I want that in every capacity of my life.
Yeah.
Right? Because it feels too good.
It does.
Right? And we become addicted in different ways. Some people become addicted to suffering. Maybe they think that they deserve to suffer. Right? Maybe it's because, the chemicals that you've had going through your body, like you've rehearsed those chemicals over and over and over and over again. You become addicted to the suffering. Sometimes the suffering makes you feel alive. You know what I mean? That's all you know. And you see that with people who are combative, the people who look for fights. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the way they feel alive. That's unhealthy. That doesn't get you to a really great place in life. And you know that, but that's all you know, right? Yeah. The fight. I just know how to fight. I just know how to be in survival mode. Well, if you're in survival mode when what you're trying to accomplish doesn't require you to, reach survival mode, then you're going to bring an energy into an action that is far too powerful. And that energy is probably coming from a place where in the past you didn't get what you wanted. It's coming from a place that was unhealthy for you. And you're going to project that into the future, and you're going to bring a survival instinct that doesn't need to be there. This is us just wanting to hit a ball. This is us just wanting to live a good life for a day. Like, you don't need to think like you need to avoid a train. Does that make sense?
It does, man.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it does. And I just personally want to thank you for pulling back the curtain on your long life and career and all the things that you've overcome. You mean a tremendous amount to me. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. And, we'll look for you out on the field and helping unlock the mind for other kids so they can enjoy the sports and life they have, man.
FusionOdyssey.com is my website. I'm actually in the process of creating a digital course, online course that really is about the emotional component of performance. Scared to fail, free to succeed. That's kind of how I view it.
Excited to hear
and
it.
Teaching people about the journey and how to redefine the entire experience, but also understanding why they felt the way they felt. Once you understand it, you become empowered to really change it. And I'm going to help you understand how to change that. But that being said, FusionOdyssey.com is the website. Fusion Odyssey on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. You can find me there. I don't post consistently. I've said this before. I'll say it again. Now I'm going to start doing that just because I need to. But anyone can DM me if they have something going on and they want to consult with me, or they just want to know about my video series or just anything else, or want to try to work with me privately, which is a hard thing to do at this point. That's where they can find me.
Well, I'm so glad you opened up and also started the video series, because I think, even just as a lame person who's not focused on achieving in sports, but just in life, there's so much there to unlock the mind. So thank you so much,
Thank
man.
you, CS, for having me,
brother. Much love.